This 16 terabytes portable solid-state drive, which costs over $1,000 on Amazon, is now available for the price.
Colonel, we're talking about boots on the ground. It's looking pretty much certain now. I think it's about 3,000 Marines heading to the Strait of Hormuz. The bombing of Karg Island, which we've been talking about a few times now, the oil hub for Iran, where 90% of the oil is refined and shipped. That's been struck. Not the oil infrastructure, but the airport and the military installations there. So it's looking more and more like there's going to be troops heading to Karg Island to seize that part of Iran and choke off their economy. Sounds terrible based on every expert I spoke to, but I'd love to get your thoughts on how terrible of an idea it is.
Yeah, it is a terrible idea. Though I will say just right at the outset, that's what everybody thinks. So I think that there's at least a 50% chance that's not the target. I think that what we're trying to do is signal to everybody in the world that that is our target, and that could mean one of two things. One, it could mean that we are as foolish as some people claim that we are, and we are going to hit Karg, and that's the reason why they hit all these military targets to, quote, soften it up before we bring in some sort of air assault, because you can't take anybody in by boat, so it's got to be that. Or we want everybody to be looking right there, and then maybe we'll go into one of the other islands, maybe in the horseshoe of the Strait of Hormuz, some of these other smaller islands, to try and control traffic that way. So it could be either one of those, I'll say. I'm not convinced it's Karg because it's so obvious. My hope is that we're not that foolish, but it's a 50-50 shot. That's about as much credit as I'll give. However, whether it's the horseshoe or whether it's Karg, they are both equally bad ideas, because just getting them in there, listen, any kind of time you're going in with helicopters, that is the most vulnerable kind of aircraft that you can get, because they're obviously slow moving. There is a ton of different things on the market, black market, or even inside the IRGC military, shoulder-fired missiles, machine guns, other kinds of weapons that could be used, obviously missiles as well. I mean, it would be a disaster in my view, because you're going to have to fly all that water to get there in any place. So it's going to be pretty. You're going to be naked. It's going to be obviously you're coming in. They're going to be able to see it by any number of ways, and they're going to be vulnerable all the time that they're flying in there. And then once you get on the ground, let's say that you get through all the fire, and then you get onto the island with some amount of force, especially if it's Karg, there are some defenders on there, so it's not going to be an uncontested situation, so you may have to fight your way on. It's not as though Iran is going, oh, wait a minute, really? They could be going to Karg? I never thought of that. Of course they have. That's been part of their contingents probably for decades, recognizing the vulnerability of that, or any of these other islands. So they certainly have contingencies for how to defend them, and then if there's a successful landing, what they would do after that. And of course, it doesn't take much map reconnaissance to look and realize how close it is, any of these are, to shore batteries, whether it's artillery, drones, rockets, missiles, which many of them can come from anywhere in the country, but they're all within range of that. So even if you somehow manage to get through the air, and you manage to get to the ground, and you manage to fight your way into some sort of defensive positions, what have you gained? What are you to do other than to say we have control of the island? But listen, you can just fire some Tomahawk cruise missiles and take the whole thing out in a minute. If your idea is to deny the Iranians the ability to have that oil, you can do that right now by just pushing a button and not risk anybody's life. But by having somebody on board, I mean, even if all of these things were overcome and it was successful, I don't know what you gain at the end of the day. So why are you sending troops into the Karg? Because that's not going to do anything at all to open the Strait of Hormuz. That doesn't even address that issue. It only addresses control of the Iranian oil if you were successful and you somehow just had it in your hand. But I also think that the chances that Iran would say, you know what, darn it all, we had a good defensive plan, but those darn Americans are at the tactical level, they seized control of it, now they have control of 90% of our oil, shucks. No, in my view, there is no way on God's earth that they're going to allow us to have effective control of the oil and the facilities. I think if it came down to it, they would burn it to the ground themselves in attacking our troops. And that's the second issue there, is that even if you successfully get on the ground, how are you going to sustain it? Because all the difficulty I just described to you getting onto the island itself would then have to be done on a regular basis to get supplies in or to get medevac out. if you have people that are wounded on the ground, how are you going to do that? How are you going to have medical support on the ground? All of these really practical, elementary kind of thoughts don't seem to have been thought through very carefully. So if it is the Card Island, I don't know what the game is. If it's the other one, and they say in the horseshoe, okay, well, it's really that's really what the target is. This is a deception plan, and they're really coming after here so that they can get the strait opened up. Well, another map reconnaissance by a second lieutenant would say, you know what, on the other side of the horseshoe, in the old Gulf of Oman area, you've got about, I think it's like a 300 or so mile border, shoreline of Iran that's also, you can go scores of kilometers deep into the country where they have all kinds of artillery batteries, air defense missiles, cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles, just regular long-range missiles, all kinds of stuff. It would still be a gauntlet. Anything would coming in or out would have to go through all that and to be able to pass it. So even if you hold the horseshoe area, what does that gain you? Because you've got to be able to take out, really, if you look at the whole strip of things that would be necessary to force an opening of the Hormuz, you would have to take a whole strip of the country, maybe the size of Vietnam. I mean, and even that, Mario, that would still not say it's open because that part is, yeah.
They're the ones you're talking about. There's all these small islands.
Yes, that's the one. Then up in the top right-hand corner, there's a number of those that are in there. And then if you scroll to the right into the Gulf of Oman, you have that whole long strip of the Iranian coast that, by many reports that I've seen, yeah, all of that stuff right there. And then you scroll even further to the right, all the way to the border, and you see that's the shore. Every ship would have to go in range of that to go up and down the Gulf of Oman.
Yeah.
And how are you gonna denude that? How are you gonna get rid of all of the risk of Iran coming from that direction, because you know they have them? So just A to Z, I see no benefit from the attempt. I see great cost to even try to do that. The almost certainty is of losing these troops. And even if by some miracle you succeed, what have you gained that's different than right now? I don't see it.
Watch how this tiny thing removes all mold from my musty basement in just 4 hours. It's honestly insane. It literally destroys mold everywhere and doesn't even need a filter. And check this out. This is a basement in our old house. You can clearly see some mold situation going on over here. So let's plug this in. I'll come back by the end of the week to show you the result. So yeah, here we are. Let's see how our ionizer is doing. The room has just been repainted. And check this out. This place here was fully covered in mold just 2 days ago. And it's completely clear now. No mold or anything. Isn't it insane? I'm telling you. This thing is completely nuts. Here's why it actually works. You know how most air purifiers use filters to get impurities out of the air? Yeah, so they pretty much rely on mold spores to come and attach to that filter so you can keep on buying new ones. But this thing does it the opposite way. It seeks out and destroys mold wherever it is. Air, walls, vents, anywhere.
Yeah. I'm struggling to see it as well, because you talk about Card Island. If they do enter Card Island and be able to seize all the oil facilities, number one, Iran's not going to let them ship oil from there. If they choke off Iran's economy, well, they can destroy them. That's much easier, but that would hurt the global energy market. The oil price would just skyrocket if Card Island's been hit. And if they seize them and try to produce that oil themselves and keep the money, instead of destroying it, seize it and make that oil theirs, it's not going to work either. Iran would just keep bombing it, firing artillery, firing missiles towards it. So Card Island doesn't make any sense. And you've got all these other small islands. You talked about they have to go through the air, obviously, if they can't enter the island through ships, because they'll just be struck. They'll become sitting ducks for the Iranian military. And this is why they can't escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, because they'll be struck as well. They'll become sitting ducks. So if they have to do it through the air, you talk about using Chinook helicopters, for example. You said they become very easy.
Yeah, this is what I thought. So why wouldn't you just go to Amazon for it? I need to order this book.
Defense systems that would allow those helicopters certain protection.
Nope.
Did you see that? That's a terrible idea.
No, it's just a terrible idea. I mean, there was some video out overnight I had on my show earlier today from the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, which was attacked again. And you see a single, really slow-moving, like flying lawnmower flying through the air. You hear it flying, you see it coming down. Are you kidding me? On the 5th Fleet headquarters, after all this time, and then a single drone nothing shot it down, and it struck its target. And if we can't even stop a solo drone, much less a swarm of them, on our 5th Fleet headquarters base, then what do you think we're going to do about some helicopters that are coming in that are incredibly vulnerable and on a much higher priority target for Iran? So
You saw a Seaman got stuck as well today. I think it's Saudi or one of the Gulf countries. Have you seen that footage? It got damaged. I don't know if it got struck today or today we're finding out about the damage, but I saw that one of the Seamans got hit. So if all these don't make sense, is there any other options for these Marines? Could it be, I'm not going to use the word bluff anymore because every single thing I thought was a bluff turns out to be reality and even beyond what actually happened. So then if these Marines are there, is there anything else they could do? Could they support other American bases? But I don't think they're prepared for the Marines and Navy.
yeah, I mean, you could do base security. I mean, that's one of the primary topics or missions for Marines. But I mean, that's useless. That has nothing to do with the war. It has nothing to do with winning anything. It would just be putting them. But I cannot overestimate to you and overstate how stupid this is to send one MEU, one Marine U, with whatever it is, I think 25 actual Marines on it, one ship into to fight again in a war against a country. I mean, that's like saying, hey, you know what would be cool? Let's do Normandy in World War II, and let's send a couple of divisions and maybe 5 or 6 ships. I mean, you saw that there was hundreds of thousands overall troops that were involved in that, and thousands upon thousands of aircraft that were bombarding it, and hundreds and hundreds of ships that were involved in it. That's like saying we're going to do something complicated with a handful. You can't go after any target at all in Iran with a ship. I mean, that is absurd to the highest degree. I'm just shocked that they're doing that, unless it is some kind of a thing. But it's a pathetic one because Iran is probably going, please send that ship to me because I've got all my cameras out ready to capture the destruction of it, and that's going to help us in our PR war around the world as well. I mean, I can't imagine that would do anything except make them excited that you're going to make it easy on them to actually hit us. So I don't know. I hope it's some kind of a thing that's foolish and it's dumb. It's not going to work. But that it's a thing and not we're actually going to use them. So we'll have to see how it works out.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to think what other possibilities there could be. To escort ships, you don't really need another 2,500 Marines to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And escorting ships, the Navy said it themselves. Okay, it's not on the table. Even I think there's reports that Trump was requesting it, and the Navy said it's just not possible militarily. It will be and now if they do seize an island, there's another issue as well. If they cannot, and you kind of hinted at it as well, if they cannot defend the bases, you talked about the 5th Fleet base being shot by one drone just fine with no protection whatsoever.
Back to Douglas Allen. What are those called?
And what if they did? I mean, you see, we're already bringing stuff from South Korea into we had to dismantle our THAAD. We're bringing in air defense because, I mean, whether it's Patriot or THAAD, everything's being hit. And even when everything was working, it was a really small percentage. So, honestly, one of the things this war is showing so far is that air defenses are just not that good. I mean, we have the same thing playing out in Ukraine for 4 years now on their side. Russia actually seems to be better at air defense than our side has been, at least in drone warfare. But even there, a lot of stuff gets through some of their oil infrastructure. But here, it looks like in both Israel and in all of our bases and our allies in the region that.
Do you need a loan for your business? Well, if you've been around for over a year, I'm about to show you how to get up to $3 million in funding. Sounds too good to be
I see, I'm gonna get it for $30.
I'm about to show you how you can access
Look at
the
that.
capital your business needs without putting up a king's ransom to get it. You don't need $100 million business. You don't need to spend weeks filling out paperwork
Or
and
I'm gonna get it
hurting
for free.
to pay high interest rates. All you need is a business that's older than 12 months and makes at
Let's
least
go. People who do this are awesome.
Every single day, thousands of business owners across the U.S. get loans to expand their operations, hire new staff, or purchase equipment. That's billions of dollars in funding available to help small and medium-sized businesses like yours. You could get up to $3 million in your account as early as tomorrow. And that's why we created My Business Loan Companion. My Business Loan Companion is designed to help business owners like you
Yeah, still
get
don't have
everything you need quickly and easily. With My Business Loan Companion, you get fast loan approval. Money can be in your account as early as tomorrow. Flexible repayment terms that work.
You're lucky if you get 10% knocked out. So that's with everything functioning. And when you get it knocked out, you have a situation like it rain overnight where a drone flies by itself and just pops right in. So
Yeah, I'm sure the number of hits. There's been 4 FAD systems that were damaged or destroyed in Jordan, UAE, Saudi. Total cost us $2 billion. There is a early warning radar in the Qatar base in FPS, AN/FPS 132. There's the drones, the MQ-9 Reaper drones. There's 11 of them down. There's also the 3 fighter jets that were lost in Kuwait. There's the tanker that was lost, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago. All crew members also killed. That was the KC-135. And then we have the SATCOM terminals, 2 of them that were destroyed in Bahrain. And the 5th fleet is probably the one you're talking about. I read somewhere there's also a CRAM that was destroyed or hit, but I asked people to verify that. Yeah, there's 3 radomes at Camp Arif Jan in Kuwait. So that's in US bases. Now, if they choose not to seize an island, is there any scenario where entering Iran, the mainland, would make sense to seize the uranium? For me, it just sounds even more foolish, because if the island, which is away from the mainland, is difficult, you go to the country itself. It seems like a suicide mission.
you know, if there was ever even the theoretical, hypothetical possibility, it would have had to been like when we thought we were getting in the process of negotiations, and we could have such an operation that could go in covertly, and that would imply we knew what it was, so that they were not ready for it. And even then, it would be an incredibly high-risk mission with a low probability of success. Right now, it's 0. There is no possibility because everybody in the world is paying attention, and who knows where this stuff is. I would wager they probably don't have it in one spot, so they don't have a single point of failure if it's discovered. I bet they have it parceled out in 3 or 4 different parts at least, so that they can make 1 or 2 nuclear weapons if they decide to go that route out of whatever they have in any one different spot. Now, that's my guess. That's what I would do under certain circumstances. But the bottom line is, I doubt very seriously whether we know where it is. Israel has fantastic intelligence capabilities, and they have proven over many years, even when Iran knows that they're being monitored, that they've still been able to find stuff out. So I don't put it past us to know where it is.
They put out the notice and a reward of $10 million if they're able to get information from if anyone provides Mossad information about some of the Iranian leaders. So for me, when I saw that yesterday, I'm like, it seems their intelligence has reached a plateau now. They leverage it, they squeeze that lemon as much as possible. So then they put out a notice giving $10 million for a bunch of leaders, including the supreme leader.
Because they played all their cards. Everybody was patting them on the back when they assassinated Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. And the pager stuff that went on because there was all this clever stuff that had never been done before. They're like, yeah, 2 thumbs up. You had a tactical moment of blip there, but every time you do something like that, you eliminate it from being used again in the future. You had in the start of the 2025, the 12-day war, where Mossad and all these people did like something Ukraine did in Russia with Operation Spiderweb. They had their version of it where they had drones going off. You played that well. Well, now then that's pretty much taken off the rep because now they're looking for that. And so all these things that have happened in the past, now then you're looking for. So now that your universe is shrinking of things you can do that are different. And so now that when you really need some good intel, and when you really need to be able to use your intelligence to find something, it's going to be next to impossible or a whole lot more difficult because of what you've done in the past. And so that's always the diminishing returns situation here and now. If you even think about wanting to have a snatch and grab like that, like we did with Maduro, then you've got to first know where it is, and then you can be sure, even if whether it's in one place or whether they've parceled it out, that it's going to be heavily defended with the expectation. I mean, they've got to believe and expect that they're
I've read all this stuff thousands of times. I'm
So
still ready to go just to see if there's a
is to be able to
new thought they have or a different perspective or way to articulate something. Whatever.
Stuff, and then they're going to have troops on the ground to make it very, very difficult. It's almost guaranteed to be in some kind of deep underground bunker. And how are you gonna go force that? How are you gonna force going into something deep, and then they gotta have problems with
Maybe
several
it's
layers
also publicly
to
traded.
through that, even on top of the being underground. So the military cap is just
Earth sharing is a bunch of those.
I know it's, everybody loves to say that because they think that we're really good at that, but, I mean, unless Iran is stupid and they have shown no evidence of being stupid, I think that they have it pretty well protected and would be suicidal just to try.
Kabul, it's starting to look really bad. Honestly, it's genuinely starting to look really bad. We cover wars all the time. You've been covering it a lot more than I have. And we understand that the media tries to dramatize different stories. But
So,
So, 1, 2. You have to stay.
I can usually tell. So I can get the market cap and the price for a lot of securities. I looked at a lot of securities.
now you saw the Oman one that struck a few days ago. The oil before the port that was burning for days. We've got the Fujairah plant, which I've always talked about as a very significant choke point for oil as well, because it's an alternative to the Strait of Hormuz. That's been burning. We've got Iran now striking financial tunnels in the Emirates and a few other Gulf countries. And now we're talking about sending troops on the ground. We don't know how Iran will retaliate. Will they strike? David Fass was talking about the risks, and we've been talking about it as well, of striking desalination plants in the Gulf, and what that means for the Gulf nations that depend on those plants for their water. It's starting to look foolishly worrying, and the number is also on the various betting platforms. The likelihood of the war ending this month has dropped now to like 16%. It was 65% when we started, now it's all the way down to 16%. And the likelihood of troops is about 50%. Some sort of troops on the ground, boots on the ground, which we could talk about how crazy that is. And now, I've also been talking about the risks of Russia, China getting more and more involved. Well, the foreign minister, Arachi, said the following. He said, Russia and China are our strategic partners, and we have had a close cooperation in the past, which is still continuous. Now, he said something in this interview which he hasn't said before. We knew there's military support, especially when it comes to intelligence, by China and Russia, but we didn't know how far it went. But he said, and that includes military cooperation as well. I'm not going to go into any details of that. I'm starting to worry right now that the Russian and Chinese are starting to see this as an opportunity for them. And if they continue supporting Iran, and Iran is continuing to strike Israel, I'm talking to people there, Israel is getting struck by these cluster munitions, the missiles with the cluster munitions on a daily basis now. The destruction there, with heavy censorship there, so we can't really get an idea of the amount of destruction. But they might not be able to sustain it. And I think even again, David Sachs in the same video, he talked about the worry that if Iran keeps bombing Israel and keeps destroying Israel, the worry of Israel using a tactical nuke increases. And I'm starting to worry that this is no longer a taboo. The nuclear taboo would be broken by the country that has broken so many other taboos, including striking an American ally Qatar a few months ago. But all these different scenarios are starting to look pretty damn realistic.
Well, and let me just kind of deepen your fear and your concern there, and to match mine, is because I believe that there's now mounting evidence that President Trump is suffering serious cognitive decline. Different than what President Biden was, because that was more evident that, he would kind of zone out or whatever. This is a different kind to where you appear to be cognitive and coherent, but your mental processes are badly degraded. And I mean, let me just read something to you here. This President Trump put this out on Truth Social a couple of hours ago. He says many countries, especially those who were affected by Iran's attempted closure of the Strait of Hormuz, will be sending warships in conjunction with the United States of America to keep the strait open and safe. I don't know what he means by keep it open, because it's neither open nor safe. And then here we go. It's like detached from reality. We have already destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability. But it's easy for them to send a drone or two and drop a mine here and there, so we still have to, no matter how badly we defeated them, they still are fighting. Then he adds this. Hopefully, China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the UK, and others that are affected by this artificial constraint will send ships to the area so that the Hormuz Strait will no longer be open. I mean, what kind of, delusion can you think that China is going to send ships to go against Iran, or that any nation is going to send ships when our Navy won't do it because it's suicidal. And yet here he is, claiming that we have 100% destroyed their military capacity. I mean, it just beggars belief. If that's the guy that's calling the shots here, now that is the same guy who single a marine ship to go and fight a country that has hundreds of miles of shoreline and thousands and probably tens of thousands of drones, missiles, and underwater torpedoes and underwater missiles, as they call some of them. I mean, it's frightening that he's the guy that's calling the shots right.
They've also used that Iran is considering something very weird. They're considering now to only let oil tankers through the Strait if the cargo is paid in Chinese yuan, ditching US dollar for most trades. Have you seen that?
I have, and
There's something happening behind the scenes with China. They're incentivizing China to support them further.
they're dragging China into help further, or they're just mocking the United States, knowing that would be even more fatal than a military loss if you lost the petrodollar. And if people were able to say, I don't care, I'll take yuan, I'll take whatever, as long as we get the oil out here. If there's enough pressure on that, I think that that would be a bigger issue. Believe me, the United States will do everything it can to prevent that from happening, even more than the combat itself. So, but if somehow that was happening, and you have to, and I won't say guarantee, but likely that the Chinese were open to that, and certainly be happy if that happened. At some point we may have to get to the position where the West is going to have to say, are we going to keep letting tankers go through the Gulf?
We're just there.
Either, regardless of what they're paying for, it's like Chinese ships going out, Iran has been sending ships out. They're making more, at least according to the Wall Street Journal, than they had before the war started, at least up until 2 days ago. So, are we going to keep letting that happen, or are we going to finally interdict that? I mean, we've taken out Russian ships and claimed it was part of the Shadow Fleet or whatever. I don't know. Would we do that? Because then you have the risk of really escalating this beyond the Persian Gulf and possibly even including both Russia and China. And this keeps getting worse. And I'm sorry, I just realized I didn't answer your question a second ago. I do have worries that a desperate Iran and Israel could resort to nuclear weapons if it drags on, a month or two or maybe 3, and you're still hitting this damage that you were talking about a minute ago. I do worry about that taboo breaking tradition that they have established here. So this could go a lot worse. This idea is going to be over by the end of this month. I don't even put it at 60%. I put it at none. There's no percent chance of that happening. But I'd like to see them start gaming out what the percentages are as time goes on, that this escalates beyond the Persian Gulf and outside of the current combat. That's what I worry about.
Yeah, on your point on Trump's post, asking China to send ships and other allies, not many China send ships to open up the strait. Obviously it sounds foolish, but there's a lot of foolish things he says, and I'm hoping that's not part of his controlling the narrative strategy, which he's been doing so well. That's what I'm hoping. I'm sure there's advisors by his side. Obviously his actions will determine whether I'm right or not, but it's a hope. There's another comment made by Arachi as well. Now he struck the Fujairah oil plant, and he said that it's because there were rockets that were fired on Kharg Island and Abu Musa Islands, so the islands that were struck yesterday by Trump. Some of them were fired from the UAE, including Ras Al Khaimah.
This records conversations better than taking notes ever. This is Pocket, an AI note taker that records conversations. So we don't have to. I use it for meetings, phone calls, even
and close to Dubai. So it seems that, according to Iran, the UAE was used for attacks against Iran, which is surprising. I thought the Gulf countries would want to try to get a close end to the war, if this claim is true, not be involved in striking Iran, or play a role in striking Iran. He also made another comment here, and it's going to lead to my next question. He said, what we are doing now is on the principle of an eye for an eye, which is very well known. So looking at this eye for an eye strategy, how would that look like if the US sends troops? Now, I'm trying to figure out what would be the step in your mind that would lead to them crossing the line and starting to strike desalination plants?
You can go eye for an eye, a lot of things, but obviously troops is not. They don't have any capacity nor desire to send any of their troops anywhere outside of their territory. They're going to want to defend their borders.
This is buy low, sell high, buy low.
You try something like that,
Essentially.
whether you succeed or not. If you ask what might be the threshold, if we try
Short-term trading, maybe. Okay, yeah, they went to weeks, I was gonna say. This is daily, and then this is, again, a few weeks.
then I think you're going to get some big counter strikes a bit commensurate with something else of equal value in the Gulf. That's why I said there's zero chance in my mind that Iran will ever allow us to actually have operational
Computer drive frequency trading.
Clearly, they have the capacity to do it. So I think that would be your next line for escalation. I think it is in Iran's interest not to take it beyond an eye for an eye and, to have an eye and an ear for a tooth or something like that. I think that they want to get the thing over, but you saw one of the Iranian generals, or the IRGC generals, overnight, said, yeah, we're willing to talk and negotiate a settlement, but their terms are, you will pay for all the reparations that we have lost, and we'll have an international consortium guaranteeing our security going forward. Of course, those aren't even in the realm of possibility right now, but that shows, in my view, that the Iranian side is saying, we're very confident that we can maintain this level of enduring pain that you're putting on us for months. And we calculate we can endure more pain than you can, and we can inflict it for months. And then, so we're asking for something right now that shows they aren't even thinking about any kind of submission terms that Trump keeps asking for. Again, last night before he fired on Park Island, or as he fired, claimed that, we're going to go after oil next and until you surrender and lay down your arms and all this kind of nonsensical statements here. And obviously, that's not going to happen. And instead, they're more defiant than ever and saying, now that here's the term for us, for you to capitulate to our terms. So everybody's hardening their position. So this is not going to end anytime soon.
Honestly, I feel like this computer's gotta start
Why
running
is the
slow.
countries not forcing Trump's hand? Is it they don't have enough leverage over Trump, or do you think they want Iran to fall as well? Because I thought the countries, all of them are struggling financially. Now, obviously, me staying in Dubai, I've had 3 strikes into my building in 2 days in a row, this morning and yesterday morning as well. But that's not as significant as the Gujarat plant getting struck. And now the risk of the desalination plants. So my question is, I thought that would be enough, because we know how these countries are so important to the US economically, but also Trump and the relationship with these countries. He spent a lot of time closing rapport with them, even before he was president. So what I'm wondering is, do they not have enough leverage over Trump and his decision making, or is Trump's objective too important that their opinion doesn't really matter? Or are they aligned with Trump and seeing Iran fall? Because I don't think anyone wants to see Iran become a failed state while they
This guy owns this company?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's the last one at all. I think that what you're seeing is the manifestation of decades of subservience to whatever the United States wants. It's just abject, this is what we're going to do. That's like the DNA almost of the leaders and the United States. It's like that's just how things work. And so now that you try to change the paradigm, in the course of 15 days, I just don't think that you're going to break decades of submission to whatever the U.S. wanted because it was
He owns the company. He said there. Good bad. That's funny. If you're gonna make a YouTube video, push your own product, right?
Making some hard conversations with amongst themselves and saying, how much longer are we going to go? Because if you start living and getting into the United States like we've done in the past, is going to start putting our regime in question. If we have problems with our own domestic people, if we have problems with our domestic economy, and it starts to make our control start to wobble, then you're going to start seeing some people going, okay, hang on, I want to work with you, but not at the cost of potentially, having our own control of our population put at risk. And then I think you're going to start, and I think this is also part of the conversation that's going on now, they're going to say, is there anybody else out there that we might could use to have a stability to, i.e. BRICS, China, Russia, whatever, because they don't go off looking for dragons to slay. They don't have wars and toys that have getting blown up. They can try to do business, maybe access that we have here. And so I'm guessing, and I don't know what I would do in their shoes, is let's get this one over with as quickly as we can, with as little pain as we can, and just so we get a chance to catch our breath and then think through all the ramifications of this. But I think they're already thinking about
Okay, so Richard Johnson had a line this cover is insane and the design is all new. It's built off of the Ridge Wallet 2.0 platform, which means 10% lighter, more modular, and now works seamlessly with accessories and other trackers. So if you ever misplace it, just open this on.
Companies. It'll probably keep going after that. Companies. Companies. I gotta finish. I was getting rid of all the S&P 500 ones. I got the 200. I got 300 more to go. Got the 100 oldest publicly traded companies. I got the S&P Latin American 40. And then the first ones on the first pages are just good investment opportunities. I gotta go through this whole list. Essentially, we'll go through this whole list and find something that's value investing.
What would the US do then? Would that be a reason to de-escalate, or would that China directly involved in the proxy war on the other side?
It's China directly involved in the proxy war, because they're not well aware of the hawkishness of the American foreign politics regarding that.
I've got some cheeseburgers that I need to eat, so and then I have to brush my teeth.
No, this is actually all direct.
It's 1 a.m. We'll be doing this until like 4, even if I'm not live the whole time.
If it became clear that I was actually giving
Here until 4.
weapons and ammunition to Iran, a la what we were doing to Ukraine, we wouldn't go, well, you know what, tit for tat. I mean, that's fair.
Nobody watches this
Ukraine
shit.
against Russia, so it makes sense that they would do it. No,
Gotta start
they're separate
getting
entities
people to
here.
watch your
No
videos.
one can do that to us. Look how we're freaking out because of some reports that Russia is providing targeting intelligence, just intelligence,
Whatever.
not weapons and ammunition. And people are already going, oh my God, we have to do something against that. You had Senator Slotkin, testimony this week, said we have to take decisive action against Russia because they've been doing that. Oblivious to the irony of what she was saying because of what we're actively doing right now. But that's indicative of what you can expect. That we would say, how dare they do that? We need to take action. China knows that. So I think China's interest is like, let's help them as much as we can because it's in our interest for Iran not to fall. But let's don't get ourselves involved because America's making so many unforced errors. We don't need to get involved, and they're going to eventually kill themselves in this, and it's going to cost them so much. So I think it's wise for the Chinese to let things go to help enough to make sure they're not going to fall, although all evidence suggests that they're not going to. So I think they're going to be content to help them in minor ways, or at least subtle ways, for the time being.
I just feel like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for China to, number one, they cannot have the Strait of Hormuz fall into American hands. Now, if the US is gonna do whatever is necessary, the objective behind the scenes right now, Colonel, is do whatever is necessary to seize the Strait of Hormuz, to seize control of the Strait of Hormuz. That will be, I wouldn't say existential for China, but that will make a reunification with Taiwan very difficult if the US could turn off the tap from the Strait of Hormuz as a way to deter an invasion of Taiwan. So China is in a very tricky position because number one, they cannot lose access to the Strait of Hormuz. They cannot have their ally Iran lose access to the Strait. 20% of the oil exports. And number two is it seems like a once in a lifetime opportunity to weaken the American empire. I think this is one of the biggest strategic blunders if this continues. If this escalates and continues for another few weeks, which is looking insanely likely now, it could be a massive opportunity strategically for China. And that would reshape the Middle East for decades to come. The Middle East will not look the same after this.
Well, the Middle East is definitely not going to look the same as it is no matter how it comes out. It's going to be irrevocably changed. But I would argue to the contrary that this is not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for China, that they have to worry about if they have a Taiwan contingency, about us having control, because we can already do that. That's always existed. There's never been any question that if we wanted to, if we got into a war with China or with Taiwan, there's no doubt we can control the global commerce in there. China has no power to do anything. We could shut that down in a minute. I'm sure that's been part of the planning. Our war plans existing for decades probably. So that's nothing new. That we could do that even if the status quo before all this had started. But I again go back to, I think that China is saying, let's go help our enemy when they're already harming themselves. I think that they can say, you're going to do for us what we don't have to do in harming your own interests. And if we attempt to control physically the Strait of Hormuz and try to force it open, I believe that it will be a disaster on par with the Nazis' attempt or invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. If we attempt to do that with ground forces, I think we will destroy the American empire because we will suffer a physical loss, not a strategic loss like in Afghanistan or Vietnam, but a physical loss. Because we just have so grossly underestimated the military task, how difficult that would be. Even if you amassed 400,000 or 500,000 troops to be able to go into that, I think that you would end up losing, and we would lose everything. Meanwhile, China's sitting there on the sidelines, not losing anything, building up military power, and then the relative power between the two is going to continue to escalate in their favor, not just in the region, but now it's going to start to be globally, because we have impaled ourselves in a war of choice that only loses our military strength. So if I was China, that's what I would do. I can't say what they are going to do. I haven't read anything, but I would not get in the way of the Americans doing this, and why I'm advocating so passionately not to be doing something cool.
Yeah, life is a series of
Where do you see this by end of next month? I'm not going to even say end of this month anymore because I typically, obviously this is going to continue by end of April.
I will worry in the medium term, I'll call that, of a risk, not just of Israel using nuclear weapons, you mentioned, but of Trump using nuclear weapons. If he is detached from reality as he has demonstrated here in the recent past that he is, I can see him actually saying, all right, especially if, the oil, I think it was at $98, $99 a barrel when it closed yesterday. I think it'll probably be higher than that going forward. By the end of the month, I mean, it could be 120, maybe even higher. And if it just keeps on freaking higher, and there's no military solution, no nation's going to send its Navy to go to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Our Navy's not going to compel itself to go into the Persian Gulf. If they try something on the ground in between them, and that also doesn't work, then I could see Trump getting desperate, because now everybody's going to turn against him domestically here, and it's going to be a shellacking.
Damn, so these people in software might not even know what that is. I swear it's like that. I know that by the back of my hand. This software stuff is what I'm really gonna have to figure out.
That's the only thing that he may calculate.
But as soon as I get a good grip on this software,
I had Robert Barnes on the show yesterday. We mused about this, and I said, if he gave that order, would the system of guardrails, allow him to do that? Nobody has said no to him so far. Or as Robert Barnes got, I think if the system would check and balance and stop that, I'm not convinced that that's the case. There's nobody told him no so far. Other things that make no sense. But I think that we could come to a potential where he could potentially use a nuclear weapon if it gets just that bad by the end of the month. Because I don't see anything militarily that's going to coerce Iran to submitting to anything, to giving up control of the whole Gulf, opening the Gulf, unless they get something really big out of it. And to me, they see Russia and say, no, you started this war, it's going to end on our terms, not yours. It's going to end up something you like, and you're going to either suck it up or keep suffering consequences. And I think that will get us to the end of April, and then I think once we get to the end of April, where that danger is rise.
Well, there's a lot of threats on the escalation of it before tactical nuclear weapons, which I think would destroy Iran's infrastructure. It could be appalling if that happens. France strike their water infrastructure, their oil infrastructure, their road,
Buffett's called accounting the language of business. Once I heard that, I just essentially learned the language.
Thanks, Mario.
It made it tremendously easier to start looking into some of these things. Peace only follows.
This is the first time.
This Mario guy.
The titanium all with hand pro.
Apparently this guy's the defense genocide.
How are you? I'm okay, thank you. Our last interview got cut off by a missile siren, so I hope the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps will wait up long enough for us to finish this one. What can you tell us about what's happening in Israel? Because I'm hearing reports that with the cluster munitions, the damage is pretty significant. Obviously, there's a lot of not a lot of information coming out about some of the developments. But what can you give us an idea of how it compares at the moment to the 12-day war?
This war is considerably different from the 12-day war because back then the Iranian regime was firing dozens of ballistic missiles in one go to try to overwhelm Israel's air defenses. And many of those missiles hit and they exploded and they destroyed whole buildings, including one just down the street. It was genuinely terrifying. This time, Iran is firing far fewer missiles, but more often. So more individual salvos. And those missiles, as you noted, include cluster munitions, which means even when intercepted, they explode in the air, scatter into dozens of smaller bombs, and that's designed by definition to be indiscriminate, right? Because it's scattered 10 miles over the air. So the damage that we saw from the 12-day war, 12 people have been killed. There have been direct missile attacks. We have seen damage to property. There was a house that caught on fire yesterday from the Iranian ballistic missile attacks.
I like this. This is a good little description right here.
They used to, we've got the alerts on
Mine has this part. Cash flow from operating starts with net
so
income.
people are getting back to their routines, and we're out of the war stage of the first few days.
It's like a certain
Every few minutes. Of course, the situation in northern Israel is different, because there they're getting non-stop rocket fire from Hezbollah. But that's a slightly separate story from the Iranian ballistic missile attack.
What do you make of some of the capabilities? I was pretty surprised seeing that barrage rockets a couple of days ago. They're all, I think that was the worst since October 7th, maybe the worst even prior to that since 2006. I think a lot of people got surprised with the Israeli officials said the retaliation they're going to the retaliation by Israel is more expensive because it's going to be expanded as well. Did that catch people by surprise?
Not surprising, but it definitely is disappointing. And it's disappointing because the large war with Hezbollah ended with a ceasefire and a diplomatic agreement. And under that diplomatic agreement, the Lebanese government was supposed to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River. And it just didn't. Whether it didn't want to, whether it didn't have the capabilities, let's not get into that now. The fact is that Hezbollah, it retains its forces north of the Litani. They were able to re-establish those mattresses. And so Israel has known for the last year that since the Lebanese forces cannot very much disarm Hezbollah. It's only going to be a matter of time until Hezbollah does exactly what the Iranian regime
I'm also hugely into that. Not necessarily the best at it, but
a very major conflict
I do like studying it.
agreement fell through. It failed because the Lebanese government.
I've read about so many scientists about nutrition.
How did they continue arming themselves? Because the Assad regime has gone.
Like people that I forgot. I forget them.
Significantly made more difficult, and then Israel kept bombing them on an almost daily basis. Also, everyone thought Hezbollah's capabilities with the smuggling routes closed. Financially, in January, their economy, their currency's been collapsing. So with the supply hit hard, the Lebanese government getting stricter on Hezbollah's operations, and the smuggling routes that are full of the Assad regime, all of them disrupted. And Israel bombing them on a daily basis with no retaliation from Israel. How do they still have the capabilities they have?
Let's not be under any illusion. Hezbollah is significantly weaker than it was on the eve of October 2nd. Back then, it had tens of thousands of men poised on Israel's borders to invade. That was the plan. They had far more missiles that could reach deep into Israel, and during the war with Hezbollah, Israel significantly degraded Hezbollah, but it wasn't completely. And it did have several smuggling routes. One was through Syria. Yes, there's a new regime there, but smuggling routes did not stop them completely. Another one is via the sea. They are able to smuggle weapons through the sea. And another is their own domestic capabilities. You know, there are whole parts of Beirut, the Dakhla area, for example, where the Lebanese armed forces, the Lebanese state, have absolutely no control. Hezbollah state within a state, and there they've been able to rebuild their own missiles. And their own rockets and their own drones. So Hezbollah is not the monster that it was on the eve of October 7th. But unfortunately, in the 15 months when Lebanon was supposed to be disarming Hezbollah, it just didn't happen. And now we have Israelis in the north of the country who cannot return safely to their homes because they're scared that Hezbollah is going to shoot them with an anti-tank missile when they're sitting on their porch.
So then you said we're unfortunately at the brink of a very major, conflict with Lebanon. So how far do you think Israel will go in with the invasion? How extensive do you think the target this will be? And how will that compare to the war we saw a year and a half ago? Or more importantly, to the very destructive 2006 war, where Israel expanded the target significantly to include bridges, a lot of infrastructure, a power plant, a lot more than we saw a year and a half ago, what we've seen so far in Lebanon now.
Now, you mentioned the 2006 war. The tragedy is that that war also ended with a diplomatic agreement and the UN Security Council resolution in which the Lebanese government was supposed to, you guessed it, disarm Hezbollah. And it didn't happen. So eventually, the repeated failure of diplomacy to make Hezbollah go away, even though from what I understand, the Lebanese government really does want to dismantle it this time. In the last war with Hezbollah, as part of the broader October 7 war, Israel focused on airstrikes, and its incursions into southern Lebanon were very limited. Israeli soldiers did not stray very far from the border. And there are several scenarios for what could happen. No one's telegraphing their intentions, but one possibility is a broader ground invasion in order to create a security.
This 16 terabytes portable solid-state drive, which costs over $1,000 on Amazon, is now available for the price of a tub of chocolate. Due to tariffs, we can't export our high-quality drives made in our California
In southern Lebanon and physically destroy Hezbollah's infrastructure and sell Lebanon. Look, we have absolutely no territorial claims over Lebanon. We just want to make sure you don't have an Iranian proxy army that is firing at our people. You'll get this back as soon as Hezbollah is gone. That's one option. Now, look, as an Israeli, I don't want to go there, okay? I do not want a war with Hezbollah. I do not want to send our young soldiers and our reservists who have been in and out of reserve duty for the last 2.5 years to fight another war in Lebanon because the Lebanese government was incompetent and wasn't able to dismantle Hezbollah by itself. We would much rather the Lebanese government take responsibility for its own territory, dismantle this parasitic Iranian proxy army, and then establish normal relations with Israel. But Israel finds itself now in a place where Hezbollah is shooting missiles and drones at northern Israel. People there cannot live ordinary lives if they're even able to live in their own homes. And that is just completely unacceptable. Israel cannot allow this illegal Iranian proxy army.
I agree. I think it's a very valid argument. You know me, I'm very critical. I've said this so many times. I'm extremely critical about Gaza. But Hezbollah is a lot more nuanced. Hezbollah is the one that keeps striking Israel first for the last couple of decades. But how far do you think Israel will go? Because it's at a stage now where there's war with Iran. This is probably the best opportunity Israel has to get rid of Hezbollah. Hezbollah's supplier, ally, is facing the might of the American army and fighting for survival. And Hezbollah has lost, Assad in Syria, and now the new government is actually supporting the new Syrian government. Al-Shara is supporting the Lebanese government in disarming Hezbollah. Hamas is significantly eroded as well. Their capabilities could be not completely, but significantly diminished. So Hezbollah doesn't have the support they did years ago. So if this is the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Israel to get rid of Hezbollah, question again, how far do you genuinely believe they'll go? And what would that mean for Lebanon?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Iranian axis is completely isolated in a way that it wasn't 2.5 years ago, because that strategy of building those proxy armies throughout the region has exploded in the Iranian regime state. Look, we're now in the absurd situation where even Hamas is telling the Iranian regime, you really need to stop holding the gun. Imagine telling Sinwar on October 6th, that Iran's failure to hold him back on October 7th was going to lead to Hamas trying to restrain Iran, right? That's how much the tables have turned. And Hezbollah as well has been cut off from its Syrian patrons. Israel has now told Iranian regime officials in Lebanon, scram, like, get out of the country or we're coming to get you. So they're being stripped of their IRGC backing as well. And the Lebanese government is really fed up. They understand how destructive a war could be. So personally, I hope that the threat of a full military option will get the Lebanese to finally come to their senses and directly confront Hezbollah as the only way to save the country. Because for the last year, the fact that the Lebanese armed forces just chickened out of a direct confrontation with Hezbollah, they understood that taking on this militia would mean internal, we could call it civil war, but it could be internal strife in Lebanon. One Lebanese militia, the army, against another. And now they're back against the war. I hope that they finally take it seriously. But Israel's interest now is, look at the strategic switch that Israel has made since October 7th, okay? Before October 7th, Israel's thinking was, we can deter our enemies. It's okay, like they'll build up weapons, they can sit on our borders, we can deter them, we can appease them, we can buy them off, we can make the problem go away. That exploded in Israel's face on October 7th. And the whole country now gone for a switch. And that switch says, we're not just deterring threats, we're removing them. You cannot sit on Israel's borders, build weapons to fire at Israeli families, chant death to Israel curses on the Jews, and expect us to leave you there. So I expect that now that Iran has been stripped of that defensive shield of those proxy armies, Israel is going to do whatever it takes to make sure that Hezbollah cannot pose a threat to the people of Israel anymore. So that the people who've been displaced and their lives ruined for the last 2 years in war can go home safely. And as I said, I hope it is the movement. I hope it's something we can do in cooperation with the Lebanese now that there is a joint interest to dismantle Hezbollah that has just brought nothing but strife and chaos to everyone in the region.
I want to get your thoughts on a concern that a lot of Lebanese people have. I share the concern a lot less than others. I want to get your stance first. So, your stance, I guess, you don't think it would be a two-state solution, and there should not be a Palestine, should just be Israel. Is that where you stand, or mistaken?
I like this a lot. How many industry groups are there?
Musty basement in just 48 hours. It's honestly insane. It literally destroys mold everywhere and doesn't even need a filter. And check this out.
Yeah, this is cool.
Basement in our old house. You can clearly see some mold situation going on over here. So let's plug this in. I'll come back by the end of the week to show you the results. So yeah, here we are. Let's see how our ionizer is doing. The room has just been reheated. And check this out. This place here was fully covered in mold just 2 days ago. And it's completely clear now. No mold or anything. Isn't it insane? I'm telling you. This thing is completely nuts. Here's why it actually works. You know how most air purifiers use filters to get impurities out of the air? Yeah, so they pretty much rely on mold spores to come and attach to that filter so you can keep on buying new ones. But this thing does it the opposite way. It seeks out and destroys mold wherever it is. Air, walls, vents, anywhere. It releases 20 million negative ions into the air. They stick to the spores, clump them together like glue, and then kill them off. And it's not just mold. I use it to get rid of pet smells, floating dust in the air, pollen when there's allergy season, and I go to the hospital. Use it too to purify air from bacteria and germs. I bought like a dozen for the whole family. And everything that smelled musty for years now smells fresh. I got them for like 60% off, which is actually cheaper than a single Tesla filter for my purifier. So I didn't think twice, especially if I could just return all of them in 30 days.
Welcome to Relatable. My dad is here filling in today to talk to you about all kinds of things. But before we get into his episode, let me remind you to go to sharethearrows.com. If you are a Christian woman, or if you are a woman who is trying to figure out what Christianity is, this would be a great conference for you. This is a teaching conference, an equipping conference, a no fluff, no high emotion, women's gospel-centered worship conference. You are going to love it. go to sharethearrows.com, get your tickets for today, October 10th, Dallas, Texas. That's
I used to. And October 7th did a very good job of convincing Israelis that what the Palestinians actually want is not a state next to Israel, but one instead of it. And so the idea of surrendering the mountains that overlook Tel Aviv and surround Jerusalem to people who think that October 7th was a good idea is madness. And it's not going to happen. If the Palestinians are committed to a vision of throwing the river through the sea, then Israel is not going to give them territory to 9 miles away from the sea so they can sprint the remaining distance. I think that peace will be possible when the Palestinians undergo a switch and decide that it's more important for them to build their own institutions and their own future than it is to destroy Israel. But as long as they are committed to that vision of destroying Israel, there is absolutely no way Israel is going to give them a territorial foothold in which to continue waging that war against us. Your question about Lebanon?
Yeah, exactly. That's the question I asked you. So I just want to...
One of the core sectors, 25 industry groups.
Are worried about the extreme voices in Israel talking about the Greater Israel theory. And they even say that even the people that, oppose it, they're worried that deep down, Israel would like to see it annex territory out of
North
Israel.
America.
So this is the concern they have. Now, I disagree with them. I tell them that no, I think Israel and Lebanon could coexist the same way Israel coexisted with Egypt and Jordan.
Industry classification.
The history aside, what happened after the 82 invasion, how Israel stayed there, all the stayed there, welcome. I think the circumstances now are different, but I'm also not certain of that. First, where do you stand on the whole Greater Israel theory? And number two, do you think Israel should annex any territory from Syria or Lebanon whatsoever, under any circumstances?
The viral argument that I see mainly on Twitter that Israel is somehow interested in extending its territory from the Nile to the Euphrates is such an absurd hoax that if you ask Israelis what do you think of Greater Israel, they assume that you're talking about Judea and Samaria. They don't realize there's a whole corner of the internet that thinks that Israel wants to extend from Egypt.
What about Ben Gvir and Smotrich? I know they like to be dismissed, but they're still members of the government as well, so they're significant people with a significant
Industry
power.
groups and industry
about extending Israel's territorial control beyond the original mandate borders that were assigned to the Jewish state by the League of Nations. The idea that Israel has this vision of taking over the Middle East is part of the same whole hive of conspiracy theories and hoaxes we've seen all over the internet. The fact is, Israel and Lebanon should be at peace. It's a tragedy, by the way, that in 1948, Lebanon decided to join the rest of the Arab world and invade Israel on the day it declared independence, instead of forming an alliance of minorities in the Middle East. I think it's a historic mistake, and they're living up the consequences now that they've seen Palestinians, Syrians, Iranians all using Lebanon as their playground in order to wage jihad against Israel. I would love to see peace between Israel and Lebanon. Of all the cities in the Middle East, Beirut is the one that I really want to visit. And Tel Aviv and Beirut, sometimes if you look at videos, you can easily get mixed up and not understand which ones are the Israelis and which ones are the Lebanese. We have so much in common. I think that the Lebanese president now should do what Anwar Sadat, Egypt's president, did in 1977. If he wants to stop this, he should announce he's getting on a plane, coming to Jerusalem, and wants to speak in the Knesset and announce his intention to make peace with Israel. Now, I can understand why he won't do that, because he'd probably get assassinated. I guess it would not be, peace with Israel would not be as popular in Lebanon as it would be inside Israel. But that's absolutely where we should be aspiring, and I think every diplomat, and I've said this to European diplomats, should say that the end goal should be peace between Israel and Lebanon. That should not be taboo. That should just be the starting point of any basic diplomatic relationship.
On the Ben Gvir and Smotrich one, they have made comments that indicate that they're not opposed to an Israel with more territory than the West Bank and Gaza. So that's what they stand to. But you're saying there is I'm trying to find it now. So you're saying that there's no clause whatsoever where they talk about wanting more territory beyond the West Bank and Gaza whatsoever? You know better than I. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, Israel's spoken definitely about, given the
terrorists, the soldiers that have the badge that show up in Israel as well. So there is voices within Israel that support a historical homeland bigger than the West Bank and Gaza.
You know, I've never been able to track down whether those images are real or they're AI fakes because there is so much nonsense doing the rounds on the internet. But if it was real,
You saw the one when Netanyahu's 6 fingers, yeah, that was going viral yesterday.
that was here, it was the frame resolution. It was really- So there's so much nonsense that, like, I've seen those images, and I've tried to track down where it came from and check with the army. I've never been able to find out, like, where those images actually came from. If anyone has fantasies, Israel's barely able to keep control of the territory we have now. If anyone has fantasies beyond that, it would be a vanishingly small lunatic fringe, and it's absolutely not something anyone should take seriously. You know what Israelis want? We want to be left alone. It can be genuine, we want to be left alone, and to live in peace in the region. That's been the Israeli dream since forever.
So in 2024,
This is the world's smartest wallet. Watch this. Hey, I'm Daniel, founder of Ridge. 13 years ago, my friends and I set out to create a better wallet. Something slim, durable, and actually designed for everyday use. Today, after over 8 million wallets sold, this is where we landed, the Ridge Wallet 2.0. The redesigned system makes accessing your card smoother and faster, while still holding everything securely. It holds 1 to 12 cards and cash without stretching out or getting old. It stays slim, fits comfortably in your front pocket, and doesn't fall apart over time. And now you can add our tracker card. So if your wallet ever goes missing, you can ping it straight from your phone.
Where's the door at?
No guessing, no tearing the house apart. That kind of peace of mind is something we wish existed when we started Ridge. And now it does. And while performance comes first, we've expanded into bold new designs, like Forge Steady and
Sort of
Air
just all enough.
Same durability, same functionality, just a bolder look for a limited time. This is what Ridge has always been.
What the case is, this is good for the plunging now on our Simpsons. Tucker, how are you?
It's such a serious topic, and then you played a Ted Cruz clip, and I laughed. He already took me on head-to-head last summer. I'm not running for president, so I don't know why you'd be running for president against me. But thank you. And Pierce, as I have said publicly a number of times, you have been, even though we disagree on a lot of core issues, you have been a champion for free speech for years, especially as free speech, the allowable window of free speech shrinks, and you've been one of the world's great champions of it, so I'm not surprised that you're getting attacked for that, but good for you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Well, we're going to come to some of those attacks a little later. Just in relation to Ted Cruz, I mean, I watched that interview that you did with him, where he had no idea how many people live in Iran. And as you rightly pointed out, that ought to be probably a basic prerequisite of knowing about a country before you may wish to, for example, attack a country. And it may be that him now responding in the way that he is because you embarrassed him so much that day. And in relation to his claim that you are the single most dangerous demagogue in America, how do you respond to that?
Well, I'm honored that I beat Mamdani and AOC and the entire Democratic Party. I mean, this is a conservative Republican senator from Texas telling you that I am the most dangerous. Well, why is that? You know, I have no allegiance to any foreign country, only my own, the one in which I was born, unlike Ted Cruz, who's Canada. Why would I be the most dangerous? In fact, I'm not a demagogue. I don't seek to divide people. It pains me to see people divided. It stands for my religion and it's bad for my country. He's mad at me, well, because his interview didn't go well, as you said, that's true, I think, but he's actually most mad at me because I'm criticizing our alliance with Israel, and I'm not doing that because I'm getting anything out of it, I'm certainly not, or because I hate Israel, I don't, and never have, but because I don't think it helps the United States. And I've been saying that for the last year to increasing irritation from agents of Israel like Ted Cruz. And now this war kind of proves the point. Unfortunately, I wish we hadn't come to this, but this is so destructive to American national interest that it's hard to believe destroying American national interest, weakening the United States wasn't part of the point. How could it not have been? And the last point I would make about relevant knowledge of a country you seek to overthrow is that, like, looking at maps doesn't tell you the whole story, but it tells you part of the story, and at the eastern end of the Persian Gulf is a strait called Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's energy flows, and a huge percentage of its fertilizer and sulfur and petrochemicals and things that we need for civilization. And if you shut that down, the world economy tanks. And by the way, if you take out the government that controls one half of that strait, and that government is replaced by warring tribes, a civil war, then you open it up to piracy. And anybody with a $400 drone can prevent an oil tanker from getting to the strait. So chaos is actually the enemy of commerce, as are, terrorist regimes, but chaos is actually even more of a threat because you cannot meaningfully negotiate with pirates, even with the Houthis. So, what was the plan? What was the plan to overthrow the government of Iran or even attack it in a meaningful way without jeopardizing core American interests? And the answer is there never was a plan because the people who fucked this up don't care about core American interests. And the net effect is to hand the Middle East to the Chinese, which is what is in the process of happening. And I hope, for the sake of the United States and the world, that we can stop that. Because the truth is, our real allies in the region are the 6 Gulf monarchies that control a lot of the world's energy. And by the way, they're pro-American and decent people, as you know, since you and I had lunch there. This is a nice part of the world. It's being destroyed. Yeah, these are our allies. We have bases in these countries for a reason, not just to protect Israel, but to protect the Straits of Hormuz. We haven't been able to defend these countries to the extent that I think they thought we would be able to. We've moved a lot of the anti-missile defense that might have protected them to Israel. And so, for them, at the end of all of this, the question is going to be, do we allow the Americans to come back and occupy bases on the Persian Gulf? What's in it for us? We just got bombed for it. No one protected us. Our energy infrastructure is damaged. Our economy is offline for months as we rebuild it. In the case of Dubai, it's a branding disaster. There's no upside. And so, at that point, the Chinese, the world's largest economy, kind of sat this out on the sidelines, said basically nothing, maybe called it
I've made money investing
at
in
some
all of
point
these.
peaceful resolution to this. The Chinese,
Really honest, this is where you can get a lot of good returns. If you're buying something at 40 million, it can go up to 100, and that's more than a double.
become the dominant power in the
Here, you really have to buy at 10 million and then hope it goes to 200. Not hope, but
2 minutes before
wait.
you might arrive at that conclusion, or at least conclude that's possible. That could happen. If killing an 86-year-old religious leader didn't cause us
see, it says it right here, actually. So I had to read the next sentence. Yeah, see, because they have foreign workers grow. Sure, you can buy something here, or here.
Is either not qualified to lead anything, including one
There you go, large is small,
that person is probably actively working against America's core long-term interests. I mean, I don't know what other conclusion to reach.
If you're a dad watching this and you don't have life insurance, we need to have an honest conversation here real quick. I get it. You think you're invincible. You think it won't happen to you. But here's the brutal truth.
Nobody's exception.
It's interesting that you described the attacks when they first happened as evil and dangerous. Is that true, and is that a reflection of how you felt in that moment when you heard it had finally happened?
I got a text from someone I know for many years right when I woke up. And he said, what do you think of this? And I said, evil and disgusting, actually is what I said. And I wrote it to John Carl, who's a reporter at ABC News, who I've known since the early 90s. I had no idea this was something on the record thing. He immediately went on breaking news and reported that. I had no desire to get that out there. I want to present my views in a more cogent, thoughtful way than just growling right when I wake up in response to the news on my phone. But yes, I'm not running away from what I said. That was my initial reaction. I thought this was a disaster for American interests. I thought that for many years I've advocated against this war. I advocated against the war in Iran with Trump in the first Trump administration. So this is not a new position for me. I don't want to be vindicated in my fears. But unfortunately, I think the very few people who publicly oppose this are being vindicated because I don't know what the case is that this is good for the United States. I don't even, no one's even attempting to make that case. So instead they say, well, you hate Jews. To which I always say, not only do I not hate Jews, I think anti-Semitism is immoral, it's against my religion. Shut up, you hate Jews. And that is designed to do a bunch of different things, create more loyalty to Israel. There's so much anti-Semitism, you must be loyal to Israel. That's definitely one of the aims of this. Another is to imperil the person you're calling a Nazi because Nazis get shot, everyone knows that. And the third is to make people who disagree with you or who platform those who might disagree with you, or Bibi Netanyahu, censor them, take them off the air, shut them off, silence them. Those are the points of it. But at no juncture have I ever met anybody who has laid out like a kind of reasonable, even slightly fantastical, but just like logical case for how this war will benefit the United States, make us stronger, safer, richer. I've never heard that case. I'm waiting for it. I would love to hear it. I'd love to believe it.
You were in the Oval Office with President Trump. You were photographed with him. You met him, I think, maybe 3 times in the months leading up to this war. And I presume you discussed the potential for war in Iran with him. Did you try and persuade him that this would be a terrible idea?
Of course, that's why I went 3 times a month, 5 weeks maybe. Yeah, that's why I went. And I've known him a long time, as you have, and always got along with him, still get along with him, still like him, I'll always like him, no matter what happens. Just because I like him as a guy. And I think he's trying his best, but in this case, you know, I couldn't have an effect. I tried sincerely. I wasn't getting paid for it. Coming, of course, at some reputational cost. No one wants to deal with being called a Nazi, screamed at or threatened, or having your kids threatened, which is happening to me a lot. And no one wants to deal with that. But I just felt that this was so serious that it was worth doing whatever I could, because, my gosh, you know, people could die, the balance of power globally could change. I've never supported the idea of an American empire, but we have one, and it's in retreat, but there's a way to manage that that's not damaging or profoundly damaging to the United States, the country that I actually live in, that I was born in, and this is not the way. Wars accelerate trends in progress. They bring massive and unexpected change. Every war does it. It's the nature of war. The second people start dying, all kinds of things you never anticipated will happen. And you can't control them. You lose control of the process. I've covered wars. I've certainly watched a lot, read about a lot. I'm not an expert, but I try to apply obvious lessons through history to present-day realities. And that was the first thing I said to the president and anyone else who would listen. Once this starts, the world's going to find out exactly how strong we are, which is not something you necessarily want to reveal. An implied threat is much more effective. In other words, it's like, you know, we're squaring off for a fight, and you look huge, you go this big a lot. I'm afraid of you, but I don't really know what you're capable of until I hit you, or you hit me, and then we find out, and maybe it turns out you have no heart, you know, and you lose. I mean, war is kind of the great reveal, and you don't necessarily want to go there, especially if you've ruled the world without question for 80 years, and your capabilities have never really been tested. You haven't fought a big country, really, since 1953 when the Chinese entered the Korean War. So, like, you don't really know how people are, and you don't really want to find out. Let's not find out. How's that? But I lost, as you can see.
Did you, when you were talking to him, Sophie, did you get a sense that he was on the fence about it, that he was potentially persuadable, or did you feel that he was minded to do it, notwithstanding what you were trying to persuade him to the other one?
This records conversations better than taking notes ever could. This is Pocket, and AI don't take it, it records conversations, so you don't have to. I use it.
Well, this was over the course of a month, and included. So I went there 3 times, but I, also talked by phone a bunch, and with him about this, and a lot of other people did too. To advocate for it. A lot of people. I don't think many people within the White House were advocating for it. Is my sense. Not that I really know. I don't work there, but my sense is there weren't a lot of cabinet secretaries saying, "Oh gosh, we gotta have a war with Iran." But there were a number of people from the outside who are all for this war. I don't know who they are. Donors and advocates for Israel who are advocating for it. And my sense is you started to change. Well, obviously it did because he did it, but at no point did I detect enthusiasm for it. He didn't seem eager to do it. He didn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. That sounds fair. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want anyone to have nuclear weapons. I want Israel to have nuclear weapons. I don't want France to have nuclear weapons. That's a pretty reasonable position. But the idea that you would go in into some kind of conflict that could very easily become a ground invasion, or who knows what it becomes, a nuclear exchange. No, he was not eager to do that, from what I could tell. And again, people tailor their positions to the audience, but I talked to them a lot. And I never one time got the feeling he can't wait to do it, but I also felt, and let's be correct, that there was an enormous amount of pressure on him. Like enormous. But clearly there was an enormous amount of pressure. Where exactly did it come from? It wasn't just from Mark Thiessen of the Washington Post, who was calling a lot to the thing. Mark has a lifelong track record of doing that. But no one cares what Mark Thiessen thinks. I felt strongly, and I feel strongly now, that there were forces that were forcing him in this direction. In fact, the Secretary of State, as you said in your intro, admitted as much out loud. Said, Netanyahu said, we're going to go first, and you can either, watch your assets get destroyed and your people get killed and released, or you can join us. The question, though, is why at that point?
That was really, I think, a fascinating moment when Marco Rubio said that, because it prompted Anthony Blinken, the former Secretary of State, who's obviously done his job, to then reveal that Netanyahu had tried to pressurize both Biden and Obama into doing the same thing, using the same pretext of we're going to go and do this anyway, are you with us or not? And of course, in both those eventualities, the answer was no, and Israel didn't attack. I mean, do you think, knowing that now, knowing that from Blinken, do you think Trump may have got played here by Netanyahu?
Well, I already knew that. The Israelis had done that in the previous administration. I knew they did it in 1973, the Nixon administration, where they threatened to use nuclear weapons against and forced him to sort of just okay arms sales to Israel. So there's a long pattern of this. And I think anyone who knows anything about the Israelis knows that they're capable of this, they're capable of great violence, they take their threats very seriously, maybe too seriously to come to become self-fulfilling and argue about it, but they don't mess around. And of course, this had already happened in this administration. In June, our bombing, the 12-day war in Iran began when the Prime Minister of Israel announced to the administration, I'm doing this week. And my question then, and I raised it, was, how about no? How about no? You're a quiet state. You've got 9 million people. You're the size of New Jersey. You don't make operational decisions. And you certainly don't tell the world's dominant superpower what we're doing next. Like, why would you? That's like getting a lecture from the children. No. And that was my position because it seems consistent with the laws of nature. The weaker partner doesn't get to dictate terms. Like, what world are we living in? And, whatever, I'm not in charge. But that was my position. I think that'd be the position of most rational people. But Israel was in charge of that war. They started it, and they were in charge of this war. They started it. So this is a difficult thing for the people who advocated for the war to deal with, because their whole purpose is not to help the United States. It's to, and not even to help Israel. It's to help the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. If you're loyal to Israel, if you love the state of Israel, what do you think about what's happening in Tel Aviv and Haifa right now? They just had, apparently, an Iranian rocket right next to the Church of the Nativity. Luckily, it didn't do much damage. But this isn't helping Israel. There's no real end game for Israel here that's going to result in its long-term stability and peace. Of course not. This is a disaster.
This is so hard. I've never heard of this.
I'm not ashamed of this. But I don't want to see any country harmed. And these people are in a very tough spot because now we've left the rhetoric stage and we're in the kinetic action stage where the rest of us can just assess outcomes without mediation. Like, who controls the Straits of Hormuz in 3 years? Is there an military base? We haven't even seen it. Where is it now? Who's controlling the energy flows out of the Middle East? These are measurable phenomena. They're not susceptible to Ben Shapiro being like, oh, wagging his eyebrows at you and telling you you're anti-Semitic. It doesn't matter what he says. And so it puts them in a very tough spot. How do they respond? Well, we know from the Iraq War, not a single person is ever going to admit he was wrong. Ever. One of the most liberating things I've ever done in my life was admit that I was wrong about the Iraq War. And I was ashamed of it. I remain ashamed of it. But once you say, I was wrong and I'm sorry, this tremendous weight lifts off your shoulders. You don't have to lie anymore. And that is what liberation actually is. None of these people will do that. None. They feel no compunction, and they won't. So instead what they're doing is they're just going bonkers on this.
The only one I haven't heard
This is a precept of Israel. That defense is a strong offense. rather than like debating you on the terms or admitting that they were wrong in the forecast and there was no popular uprising in Iran and we've lost control of the world's energy, they're going to say, Piers Morgan, you're a Nazi! Megyn Kelly, you're a Nazi! And you're just like, what? That's just the kind of insulation that they're constructing around themselves to prevent, well, any kind of soul searching about how did I get it so wrong, and all these people died because I was wrong. They don't want to deal with that. But it also allows them to just like keep going on to the next war of conquest or the next satanic disaster that they'll back, which they will.
Have you spoken to President Trump since the war began?
I just through proxies. Called me names or said I was too dumb to understand MAGA or something. It wasn't, from my perspective, a real attack. I can't. I admit my weaknesses up front. Okay, I like pizza, which is wrong. I like Donald Trump, which is increasingly hard to defend, but I do. And I don't anticipate any kind of personal tiff with Trump. I think he was in an impossible spot. I think it's very obvious now that the U.S. president, under our current system, which I pray changes soon, doesn't have the latitude that people thought he had. The presidents can't just make whatever decision they want in the interest of their country. There are other forces hemming them in. We don't have sovereignty in a real way. Clearly we don't. If we're following a country of 9 million people into a war that could displace us as the dominant superpower, we don't have sovereignty, by definition. And I think every president has felt that since John F. Kennedy was murdered, and clearly they all have. And they've acted within it, with wisdom or not, but they're still acting within boundaries that they didn't set, that no American did. And it's just time to change the system, not because you hate Israel or you're anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Semitic, I don't hate Israel at all. I'm never going to. But that's not the way a sovereign country behaves or should have to behave. And Americans have earned the right to live under a government that makes decisions on their behalf for their benefit. It's that simple.
Hexclad is known for the quality when it comes to cookware, but that same thing rings true for their knives. Let's get into it. The blades are forged with 67 blades.
What Trump said about you was quite revealing, actually, because he said Tucker's lost his way. He's not MAGA. MAGA is saving our country. MAGA is making our country great again. MAGA is America first, and Tucker is none of these things. And Tucker's really not smart enough to understand that. Now, having been on the receiving end of Trump's savage rhetoric from time to time, that is pretty low base for him. But it was an interesting point about what constitutes MAGA, because, of course, there are many people with pretty short to mid-term memories who can remember Trump campaigning so vociferously to his MAGA base before the last election on saying, look, we're going to be America first, we're not going to go marching into Middle Eastern countries anymore, we're not going to wage foreign wars, we're going to interfere in other countries. And we're going to fix the economy in the United States, we're going to get the cost of living prices down, we're going to end inflation. And it seems to me that it might be that President Trump has either forgotten what he said or wants to try and reframe what MAGA really means. Because if you're a MAGA voter, you must be slightly mystified. You may not want to admit it publicly because you think it betrays Trump, but you must be mystified that within a year of winning back the White House, the guy that campaigned on not going into the Middle East again, not waging foreign wars, focusing on America first and the US economy, has now launched the biggest war in the Middle East in my lifetime that America has waged, and that has inevitably sparked the biggest economic meltdown we've seen as a consequence of the war, not least because, as you said, about the Strait of Hormuz and the damage that is inflicting, and the simultaneous attacks on the Gulf states and all the fallout from that. So it seems to me that he may want to come after you for not really understanding MAGA, but I'm not sure that many in the MAGA movement, if they're really honest, can be comfortable with what is happening here.
Look, I've never claimed to be a genius because I'm not a genius, and so it's entirely possible there are motives I don't understand. I certainly tried to understand in many conversations with them, but maybe I didn't. I'll keep that possibility open. And as for what MAGA is, it's a slippery definition. I think George Orwell wrote a bunch of books about this, including Animal Farm. Definitions change. I remember someone pointing to a picture of 100% black people once and telling me that's diversity. or thinking, looks like uniformity, actually. Like, what are these words to me? Do you know what America First means? Because it's a much more precise description, and it means you put America first in every decision that you make as an American leader. And this, by that definition, falls far short. In fact, it is by definition not America First, because the administration has already said we follow the lead of a foreign country. In doing this, we put their interest first. And I think most people, no matter how they feel about Israel, whether they love it or hate it, or it doesn't matter. It's something to do with this specific country. It has to do with any country that might be leading us around, particularly to our destruction, and putting its interests before ours. Our leaders can never agree to that, period, because it is the opposite of America First. So, whatever Trump said about me, I didn't take it personally. I suspect he doesn't really mean it. I've always gotten along with him for 30 years. I expect I always will. But on this one specific question, America First, we can say this was not America First. This was at least America Second. I do think it's obvious that Israel understood, because they're not stupid, that the effect of this war would be to get the United States out of the Middle East, and unfortunately I think that will be the effect. And they want that because why would you want a dominant power in your region telling you what to do and having you in, as the U.S. has with Israel? No, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. We may not mean it, but we still hassle them over or used to hassle them over, say, the West Bank settlement. They want the U.S. out, and they're moving to India. Okay, that's their calculation. But how is that good for me as an American? It's not. So America First. Yeah, this was not America First. Whatever it was.
Well, what is very interesting is that I can't remember a war that once it started where American forces have been committed by an American president where there hasn't been majority support for that war in the United States and the following. This is the first time where there isn't. There's a majority of a lack of support. Americans they're not buying this war. They don't want it, they don't really understand it, and they're very concerned about the consequences.
The only people who support this war are those born between 1946 and 1964 who watch all the Fox News. That's it. I'm not attacking them, by the way, they're Americans. They're my equals as Americans. I love a lot of them. But their perspective on the U.S. and the world is very different from everyone else's. Very, very different. And so they're not the ones who got Donald Trump elected, actually. The people who got Donald Trump elected are the people who hadn't voted for Republicans before or even voted at all before. And they're like Joe Rogan listeners. People who use nicotine pouches. They're Hispanic voters. They're young black men. They're non-traditional Republican voters who voted for Trump because he promised to keep doing the same thing. And one of the things he promised not to do again was to hand operational authority over to Benjamin Netanyahu, as other presidents said. We don't want any more. Why would we? And we're not going to, make Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro, who have almost no organic support in the media world, no one watches them. We're not going to hand control of our foreign policy to people like that who don't know anything, and who don't have America's interests at heart or even in mind. So, breaking faith with those people, those voters, the ones who actually got Trump elected, and whose coalition promised a new day in American politics. That's a big deal. It's a betrayal on the level that I don't think people who aren't in those groups can understand. This is heartbreaking. And by the way, a lot of people really like Trump. They like his style. They think he's hilarious. He's brave. He's just like they like him. And to see this is, it's so wounding. It hurts. I've got a bunch who work for me. I'm related to some. They're all Trump voters. And I talked to them in the last 24 hours. They're upset. They're just mad. Like, I hate Israel. That's not the impulse. They're definitely starting to hate Israel. Why wouldn't they? Our relationship with Israel is hurting us gravely. It's getting Americans killed. So they're mad. But more than mad, I can't believe he did this to us. I feel just so depressed about it.
How politically damaging could it be? You've got the midterms coming up in November. There were already a lot of reports that it was likely the Republicans would lose control of the House. Now I'm reading more reports that it may be that they even lose the Senate, which would render Trump, notwithstanding all these kind of mystical powers, to avoid the normal norms of politics in America. If you don't have control of the House and the Senate, you are a lame duck president, period. There's pretty much nothing more you can do.
That's true now. I mean, I think the conversation has moved on from the president's own attack on him. He's still, of course, his commander-in-chief. He threatened some kind of mass destruction of Iran yesterday. It sounded like a nuclear strike to me. So, like, he has the capacity, to make decisions. He's the president, elected president. However, as a political matter, that era is over. For the reasons I just described. I didn't want that to be true, but the coalition is permanently fractured. He was not elected because of Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro did not get Donald Trump elected. A lot of the people Trump is now attacking got Donald Trump elected. Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. So that coalition is done. The Republican Party is currently
Yeah, this is real estate, so it's just that operating income.
It doesn't even try to represent its voters. In fact, it shows open hostility to its voters. So nothing like that can continue for very long because it doesn't make any sense. It's a bicycle with square wheels. It's ludicrous.
You should be life insurance. My dad has never been in better shape. Lost weight, exercise.
So the question is, what comes next? And I do think it's possible to recreate some version of the 2020 Trump coalition, or the 2024 Trump coalition, on the basis of his core promise, which is just put the country first. And like, you're going to make mistakes, and we're not exactly sure how to fix certain things, but let's all try. And by the way, let's be united as we do it. The ugliest things to come out of the Mark Levin-controlled Republican Party, which I find repulsive, and I just want to say I'll do everything I can to stop that party from becoming, any more powerful than it is trying to stoke religious conflict in the United States. Attacking people for being like a different religion. We hate the Muslims, really. How is that different from we hate the Jews? Well, it's not in any sense different at all. And I would say, just thinking long term about the United States, the greatest threat is not even the loss of the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency globally. The greatest threat is tribalism, where the country fractures into warring tribes. And people like Levin are doing their best to create that. And it's totally immoral and dangerous. It will result in violence. Their endless harping on this anti-Semitism question is part of that. Anti-Semitism is immoral. It's every bit as immoral as anti-white bias, which is encoded in the federal government, by the way, and every elite institution in the United States discriminates against whites. That is every bit as immoral as anti-Semitism. That's every bit as immoral as hating anybody else on the basis of their bloodline, because it's a universal principle. It applies to every human being. It's a human right to be treated as an individual and not be held responsible for the sins of their parents. That is a human right in the West. And people like Levin and Shapiro don't recognize that because they are not Western in orientation. They think that rights only apply to the groups they favor. And that idea, that evil idea, which was the basis of Nazism, by the way, that is the thing that will destroy the United States. And the next leadership of this country, whoever it is, has to articulate we're all American citizens, we must be treated equally under the law. Bias against one group is no better or worse than bias against another group, period. Anti-Semitism. Where were you when the ADL was openly promoting anti-white hate? So now the ADL is an authority on bias crimes? They've abetted bias crimes. They are currently abetting bias crimes. The ADL and every single one of these groups has an absolute moral obligation to treat anti-white hate, which is the only kind encoded in U.S. law right now, as every bit the threat of anti-Semitic hate. How are they different? They're not. And no one will say that until someone does say that, you will not reunite this country. And if this continues, the country will fracture.
As we're talking, with glorious coincidence, Ben Shapiro has been releasing various clips on his social media platforms. One of them goes after me and Megyn Kelly. Me because he blew his gasket about Dave Smith appearing on my show, launched into my show, said it was just Jerry Springer, and I like Jerry Springer, I knew him very well, I worked with him on American Got Talent, he's actually a very smart guy, he used to be a news anchor, mayor of Cincinnati, really interesting guy, much smarter than Ben Shapiro, so I took that as a compliment, but and I responded, he didn't like the response, he's come back, he's called me Jerry Springer again, he's called me a click for, he says I'm a pussy bitch, and he goes on and on and on. I don't actually want to play the clip, because he's trying to basically suggest if you platform anybody that he hasn't approved as a speak about Israel, in other words, someone who's a propagandist for Israel, who will not criticize Israel, then you yourself are promoting anti-Semitism, therefore you're an anti-Semite, therefore you're basically borderline Nazi. But I do want to play what he said about you, because he's been railing the same stuff against you, which I don't think anyone who has watched this interview so far would have concluded, oh yeah, Tucker sounds like a raging anti-Semite, he sounds like a Nazi. You couldn't sound less like either of those things, and yet he's just posted this. Let's take a look.
I started originally criticizing Tucker Carlson for his economic programs back in 2018. And then in the more modern post-Fox iteration of Tucker, I started criticizing Tucker over his going to Russia to sniff the bread and kiss Vladimir Putin's ass. My generalized critique of Tucker in the last few months has been, one, he hosted and glossed a Nazi, Nick Fuentes, which doesn't have to do with Israel, it has to do with blazing a Nazi, Nick Fuentes. And then I did a speech at Heritage in which I went through the fact that Tucker Carlson is in no way, shape, or form a traditional conservative. That he is a conspiratorial, near anarchist at this point, seeking to tear down the fundamental ideas and institutions of the United States. Go watch the Heritage speech. I believe Israel is mentioned once in a 35-minute speech that is all about Tucker's general view of the world and how it does not represent traditional conservatism in any way. I think that Tucker Carlson has fostered anti-Semitism by having on some of the worst anti-Semites in America over and over and over, and then essentially laundering their views.
Okay, I just finished testing 3 minimalist wallets over the last few months, and there was one clear with. So as an EDC guy, I keep getting asked which...
So it's the same attack line, essentially, about the anti-Semitism, which is, if you or I or Megyn Kelly, whoever it may be, dares to platform anybody who is critical of Israel, let's be clear. I mean, in my case, I've always made it crystal clear, as you have in this interview, I have absolutely no problem with Israel, the state of Israel, with Israelis, with Jewish people, many Jewish friends. It's nothing to do with that. I reserve the right as a journalist to criticize any government, and I particularly reserve the right to criticize the Israeli government, given what it's been doing in the last few years, as any decent journalist should. Not least because, in Gaza, for example, the Israeli government continues to ban international journalists from operating there, or even going on into Gaza to verify what they've been up to. That alone should be a warning sign to everybody that the Israeli government has probably been doing things in Gaza it doesn't want people to know. So, but I took the same view. I oppose the Iraq War. We've talked about this before. I led the media campaign in the UK against the Iraq War, even though my own brother ended up fighting in it. But I opposed it, and I think was vindicated by what happened afterwards, sadly. But I opposed it and took on Tony Blair, who was the then British Prime Minister, even though my newspaper was the Labour sympathetic newspaper, the Daily Mirror, to the Labour government. But I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. It didn't mean that I hated British people or my country. In fact, quite the opposite. It meant that I wanted to help the British people and help my country from stumbling into a disaster. And I sense from you that your position about Iran is not driven by a hatred of Jews or Israelis or Israel. It is driven by a sense that you feel this is bad for America and Americans, and probably bad for Israelis and Jewish people as well.
Yeah, I mean, I care about the United States. Again, I was born here, my family's been here hundreds of years. I care about it. I don't expect I'll be able to save it, but I want to do whatever I can to make it better and to avoid obvious disasters like this one. I don't want to attack Ben Shapiro. Other than to say, like, that guy went to Harvard, and so did Bill Ackman. Like, at some point you need to reassess. No, I'm serious. These are two of the most famous, richest people in our world. They both went to Harvard. I know them both. Not geniuses. Like, not even close to geniuses. And so, like, our system itself is not producing wise people, or even very knowledgeable people. Like, Ben Shapiro had no idea there was a strait at the end of the Persian Gulf and why it was important. You need a system that produces superior people. The British Empire did a pretty good job of this. The United States, before the Second World War, did a pretty good job of this. We need to reassess our system. That's the first thing I would say. Second, you're right. This is absurd. I think I've actually even argued with you about Israel. I was taking a tougher position than you. You've been a defender of Israel. This is so crazy. He wants to talk about this in order to get this is projection. You're all about clicks. No, actually, Ben Shapiro was all about the money and about the clicks. But here's the part that I think that we should be concerned about. It is now a crime in a lot of the West to criticize Israel. People were arrested yesterday in Australia for criticizing Israel. Outside, publicly, not attacking Jews, not attacking physically anybody, saying, I'm against the state of Israel. They're arrested for it. They're in jail tonight. That's also true in the UK, as you know. It's true in Canada. It's true throughout Europe. And Ben Shapiro and people in the administration would like to make that the law here. This is the last holdout of free speech on planet Earth in the United States. It's encoded in our Constitution. Also, I would say in the American DNA. We have a right to say whatever we believe is true, period. And that very much includes criticism of a foreign country. You'll never hear me saying from the river to the sea, because I'm not exactly sure what that means. However, if I say from the river to the sea, I certainly will. And I'll do that until I die. Because that's my birthright. That's a right given to me by God, not the U.S. government. And Ben Shapiro and a lot of these people are saying it out loud. We need to penalize anti-Semites with the law. What does that even mean? You can never, in the United States, prosecute or even persecute someone for his beliefs. For your beliefs. You have the right of conscience in this country. The UK used to have it. Australia used to have it. New Zealand used to have it. Now they're going to jail for saying things that Ben Shapiro doesn't like. So we should be wary of this because it's all preparatory to legislative and regulatory changes that will ban free speech in the United States. They're saying it out loud. That's happening.
I also think that the really insidious part of it, there are many insidious parts of it. One is to silence people and to threaten them and to get them cancelled and so on, which is very hypocritical when someone like Ben Shapiro pretends to be the great, king of free speech. But also, exactly. I ended my own monologue response to it by saying those exact words, which probably triggered his little pussy bitch outburst today, as he's called me. But I think the other thing that I find insidious, Tucker, is that there are genuine anti-Semitic people. There are people that hate Jews because they're Jewish. There are people that wish harm to Jews. There are people who still have Nazi sympathies, who think the Holocaust was a good thing. These people exist. And if you start branding everybody that's critical of this current, very hardline Israeli government, with people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who have extremely hardline views, if you criticize the government and you get branded anti-Semitic for criticizing the government for policies that many people think are wrong, then what you're doing, you're allowing the genuine anti-Semites, the genuine Nazi sympathizers, to just ride under the radar. Because, if you go on social media,
You could look at it like they said there, or you could do how many times the assets are never going to go into it.
Then the ones who really are that thing get to operate much more freely, I think.
That may be true. That's not my first concern. My first concern is the innocent falsely accused. Always. It is better to let people get away with crimes than it is to punish a single innocent man. And that's always been a bedrock assumption of American justice and of justice itself. You can't punish the innocent. Of course, Israel specializes in punishing the innocent, killing the families of people they don't like. So it's not a concept that people like Ben Shapiro understand or care about. But it's the basis of Western civilization. So you do not accuse or penalize innocent people, much less kill them. A. B. This is a universal principle. It is not specific to one ethnic group or one bloodline. The principle is you cannot attack or penalize people, punish them for the sins, real or perceived, of their ancestors. Period. And in the United States right now, this has been true for 60 years, the only group that is routinely denied jobs, promotions, federal grants, college admission to Harvard is Christian whites. And it's embedded in the law in the United States. We call it affirmative action, DEI, diversity imperatives, whatever. That's the law in the United States. And so if we're going to tackle bias, and I think we should, through moral suasion, we need to attack it equally, evenly, as a universal principle, because if these protections apply only to your group, they're not valid. That's just tribalism. I don't care, actually. And then we're in a system where we only care about our own groups. No law or principle has meaning or validity unless it's universal, unless it applies to all human beings, all American citizens. And so I would just remind Ben Shapiro of that. You need to push back, if you're pushing against anti-Semitism, you need to push back against the only kind of hate and bias embedded in U.S. law. It's the U.S. law. And this administration has done not so much to change that. I don't understand why. I hope they will. But as long as we're doing this, let's just apply it to every human being, because human rights are a real thing. Those rights were endowed by God. I just want to, I know Ben Shapiro went to Harvard, but he should meditate on that for a minute.
Well, also, you should meditate on the fact that when to a lot of outrage from people on the pro-Palestinian side, when I was very vociferous in my belief when the war on Gaza started, that Israel didn't just have a right to defend itself, it had a fundamental duty to defend itself after what was an appalling terrorist attack, with 1,200 people killed and nearly 7,000 wounded and 250 kidnapped, including baby and Holocaust survivors and so on. Of course they had to defend themselves. By taking such a strong position as I did for a long time, and you and I did argue as it went on.
Yes.
You know, I took a lot of heat coming from the other side about that. And, you know, I made the point to Shapiro this week, I've taken heat from both sides, and I'm fine with that. I actually think journalists should take heat from both sides of almost any issue, because it probably means you're doing the right thing, you're asking the right questions at the right time. But he was very keen to come on my show and enjoy the clips that came from the interviews that we did, when he perceived me to be somebody on his side. But what he didn't understand was I never saw it as taking a side. I just saw it as they had a right to defend themselves, as America did after 9/11, as Britain did, you know, when we had the Battle of Britain and the Blitz. You have a right to defend your country, whoever you are, if you're under attack. But he mistook that for me taking a tribal position with him, that I was on his side. And the moment I began to deviate from that, I began to get more critical of Israel. Certainly from the start of last year onwards, I became much more critical. He couldn't handle it. And then he didn't just refuse to come on the show, he refused to reply to my texts. We'd always had a very cordial relationship. And then he started attacking me in public. And I was watching all this going, really? You're the free speech guy? You're the guy that tells the world how important free speech is? You're the one that says repeatedly, facts don't care about your feelings? And yet here you're letting your feelings override.
It's gonna run Monday morning. Fuck.
On the ground in Gaza, for example.
Would have been a time to get
All
in.
that was just so rankly hypocritical.
I just put the budget in now. What? How? He's pretty poor. Look, it pulls our...
And also embarrassing. I mean, he's ruled by his emotions. So, which is a, you know, lots of us are. I am sometimes, for sure. Try not to be. But here's a guy whose whole brand, carefully constructed brand, with his carefully constructed deal with Facebook, is based on his, like, cool analysis, sometimes, for sure. Try not to be. But here's a guy whose whole brand, carefully constructed brand, with his carefully constructed deal with Facebook, is based on his, like...
He doesn't deal with Facebook.
Discuss. He's cool analysis, right? Facts don't care about your feelings. I'm a facts guy. And here he is allowing his one overriding love in life, which is for the Benjamin Netanyahu government, to determine who he's friends with. And by the way, you see a lot of this. I mean, I called Mark Levin right after Charlie Kirk was scared to say, this is horrible, and like, let's stop fighting because we probably have a lot in common, and, let's just not fight. When you see someone killed who you love, it's like, you want to fight less. So that's why I called him, and he was nice, by the way, he was. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. And then he starts getting this whole thing about, my mother told me there was going to be another Holocaust in the United States, and he goes, they're coming for the Jews! And, I don't want to make fun of other people's fears, because, we all have fears that may or may not be reasonable. But it was so real to him, and I almost said, geez, Mark, of course, I'm totally opposed to hurting anybody, period. I'm a Christian. But I don't think we're on the cusp of that, like in Connecticut right now. But it was so real to him, like his fear of that, like, dominated everything. And it really, I guess what I would say is, I don't think Shapiro and Levin and Ackman and some of these people get the credit they deserve for sincerity. Like, I think that they really think we're on the verge of something horrible domestically. And the sad thing is that their neuroses and their inability to control their emotions divides Americans and scares the crap out of a lot of really decent people who I know who are Jewish. They're like, oh my gosh, we're on the verge of a pogrom. And you want to say, first of all, I don't think we are. Second, I'll do whatever I can to stop that because I hate that kind of thing. And let's, calm down. But no, I think they believe it, and I think the net effect is to inspire group cohesion, which, again, may be part of the point. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's bad. It's corrosive. It destroys friendships. It destroys the country. Like, everyone needs to calm down a little bit, I guess I would say.
There was an interesting response to something you said about when Trump said he wouldn't accept anything less than unconditional surrender from Iran. You discussed that and what unconditional surrender means. Let's take a listen to what you said.
Unconditional surrender means foreign troops get to rape your wife and daughter if they want, and everyone knows that. And that has been, if there's one consistent lesson of history, it means unconditional surrender means foreign troops get to rape your wife and daughter. Everyone can feel that. That's like the most atavistic instinct there is. And so to avoid that, people will do anything.
No, a lot of people jumped on that and who don't like you and said that what you were inferring was that the US military in this eventuality would be capable of raping women if Trump went through with his aim of achieving unconditional surrender. I mean, do you want to clarify what you said? Do you want to respond to what those people have said?
Sure. Let me just say, I almost never infer anything because I'm not a woman. I just say what I think. I don't play chess, I play checkers. Pretty straightforward person, ask my wife. And so if I thought that U.S. troops would rape Iranians, which I don't think, I would just say so. I don't think that. And when the U.S. military admitted that it bombed the girls' school attached to the Iranian naval base at the beginning of the conflict, my immediate assumption was that was a mistake, and I still believe that. Now, where did the targeting come from? That's a real question, and we should find out. But no, of course, I give American troops the benefit of the doubt always, as I give Americans the benefit of the doubt always, unlike Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, who are telling their viewers that Americans are going to rise up in a pogrom or Holocaust. I don't think Americans are like that. I don't think they're capable of that. And so I have very high opinion of Americans, period. And so I was not saying that. What I'm saying is a very obvious thing that any wise person understands, which is unconditional surrender is a lot to ask. And it's a lot to ask of anybody because it throws open any possibility. And the fact is, again, this is not something historically illiterate people would know, unconditional surrenders historically have always been followed by mass killing, rape, and looting. Because there's no defense. You have said, what I have is now yours. That's what an unconditional surrender is. And so it's a very, very high bar to set for anybody, and it takes off the table any real possibility of diplomacy. And diplomacy is, by the way, one of our great powers. The United States has had the ability to negotiate out of situations that will hurt us and others without violence. That's a power. That's why the State Department is the Secretary of State. My father worked there. I know how this works. And it doesn't always work well, of course, but when you don't have it at all you have left are weapons. And
our weapons are proving inadequate. So then you have to escalate to what? Weapons of mass destruction. Do you really want to go there? I don't think you do. No normal person wants to go there. So anyway, that's the only point I was making. You get would you unconditionally surrender your home and your family to anyone? Of course you wouldn't. Because you're a man of self-respect who's head of household. You would die before you allowed your wife and children to fall into the hands of someone who meant them harm. Of course, that's the standard, Dumbo. It's not about attacking American troops. It's about assessing whether that kind of threat is going to get you what you want, which is advantage to your country with as few dead as possible. I don't even know what world we're living in where the people in charge are this stupid that you would have to explain something so obvious, and that children on the sidelines, like the kid with the eyebrows, would be like barking, "You hate America's troops!" No. All I care about is the United States, in contrast to you. And so it's almost like insulting it to play along with these lies, but, I guess you have to.
I want you guys to take a good look at what it would be like if Daddy's gone, okay? Because this is it.
Please also be home. This is a bit much.
Get used to it.
You didn't say you wanted you gone.
There was something else that Ted Cruz said in his little rant about it. He said, Tucker says that no one on planet Earth hates more
All I do is read and look at the
Christians
articles
than
here.
me and my have to be an object of his ire, and I wear that as a badge of honor. I mean, is that
Or if this is going to be long enough.
you hate most on planet Earth, and is it because they Christians
I wouldn't say, well, first of all,
Books, bitch.
For Ted Cruz, who couldn't name the book of the Bible he said theology came from. So I don't think Christianity, even in its perverted Zionist form, informs any opinion that Ted Cruz has, assuming he has authentic opinion. So that would be a compliment to all the Zionists. He's beneath that. I would say I criticized Shapiro and Levin for reasons before their own reasons. I lost control of when I said that. I shouldn't have said that. I apologize for it. I do so again. I'm sorry that I said that. Because I don't hate Christian Zionists. I'm deeply frustrated with some evangelical leaders who are not preaching Christianity, but some sick, weird, culty version of it that puts Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of Jesus. And that's not Christianity. It's totally wrong. And some of them are quite ruthless. I have learned personally. Franklin Graham, for example. I went in to see Trump. And Trump says, "I just got a letter from Franklin Graham calling you an anti-Semite." I'm an anti-Semite, really? Yes, and it's right here, it shows me. So I leave the meeting, and I immediately call Franklin Graham. Like, what? Why would you call me an anti-Semite? Why didn't you call me first? If you think I'm an anti-Semite, wouldn't you want to persuade me not to be? Because that's a pretty ugly thing to be. And as a Christian, as a fellow Christian, he wouldn't take my call. I went back and forth texting with his assistant like all day. "Well, when can I speak to him? Maybe next week." He's wanting to be a private pilot. I'm like, he's 74. He doesn't have time to at least account for a letter
He's
that's sent to Trump
74.
calling me an anti-Semite and telling Trump never to talk to me again. I'm like, that behavior is so unchristian and so low, so sneaky, so dishonest that it offends me as a Christian to see it conducted in the name of Jesus. I just think that that's
So
really wrong.
funny.
I don't think I'm monopoly on the truth. I don't think I'm a very good Christian. I'm not. But to me, hey, well, when can I speak to him? Maybe next week. He's wanting to be a private pilot. I'm like, he's 74. He doesn't have time to at least account for a letter that he sent to Trump calling me an anti-Semite and telling Trump never to talk to me again. I'm like, that behavior is so unchristian and so low, so sneaky, so dishonest that it calling me an anti-Semite and telling, hey, well, when can I speak to him? Maybe next week. He's wanting to be a private pilot. I'm like, he's 74. He doesn't have time to at least account for a letter that he sent to Trump calling me an anti-Semite and telling Trump never to talk to me again. I'm like, that behavior is so unchristian and so low, so sneaky, so dishonest that it offends me as a Christian to see it conducted in the name of Jesus. I just think that that's really wrong. I don't think I have a monopoly on the truth. I don't think I'm a very good Christian. I'm not. But I don't think that's Christianity. I just don't. And I'm sorry that it makes Ted Cruz mad. As for Ted Cruz, he says he's running against me for president. I almost want to run for president just to debate Ted Cruz. Because I think it would go about the way it went last time. And for my part, I deeply enjoyed it, which is why I've never tweeted about it, because I just keep that little spark of joy inside me for rainy days, and I think about that conversation and smile.
You know, Polymarket is running a who should be the Republican presidential nominee in 2028. J.D. Vance is in the 39%, Marco Rubio 28%, as you may expect. And then comes Ron DeSantis, but you're fifth, albeit at 2% at the moment. Ted Cruz is only 1%, so you're twice as popular as Ted Cruz already to be the Republican nominee. I mean, my question being touched about today is, I know you said you'll never do this, but I would ask the question and throw it back to you, well, why wouldn't you? Given there's this huge ideological battle going on for the conservative right of America, and it's a real split like we've never seen before, and so there's so many issues now, and given that you're clearly on one side of this and clearly spearheading one part of this, why wouldn't you actually run to preserve the heart and soul of the Conservative Party as you see it?
It's not what I do. You know, I have no love of politics. Actually, I think it's disgusting. I don't understand it very well. It doesn't come naturally to me. Coalition building, you know, I just don't, where you kind of pretend you believe something or de-emphasize another belief in order to get people together to vote for the same person. That's not my default position. I just kind of say what I think, and so I don't know that I'd be good at it, A. B, I think it's very tough to be the president. I've learned that by watching over many years, and because you are constrained in ways that you should not be constrained, but you are. And it's not just because of Israel and its proxies, though that's the number one reason, but there are other reasons. And one is the size of the agencies. They're autonomous. They're countries. How do you get them under control? Some of them are dangerous. And so that's hard. It's really hard. I don't know that I'd be great at that. And there's a risk, of course, involved. And mostly because it's just not what I've done, and I hate egomania, I hate hubris, and the idea like, I've been a successful cable news host, I should be president. Like, the whole way of thinking is disgusting to me. However, if I got to run against Ted Cruz and debate him again on camera, I would run for Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. I'd run for Pope. I'd run for head of the library board. I would run for anything for the opportunity to do that and watch Ted Cruz. And it appeals to the mean part of me, I think. All you need to do with Ted Cruz, another Harvard graduate, all the dumbest people went to Harvard. That's a talking point, but it's actually real. Ted Cruz went to Harvard. Bill Ackman, who's like a moron, went to Harvard. And Ben Shapiro went to Harvard.
Tucker Carlson continuously calling Bill Ackman an idiot is so funny.
He's going to be on the Supreme Court. You ask him the simplest question possible. I'm only capable of dumb questions because I'm not a genius. Like, what's the population of Iran? What Bible verse are you talking about? Dumb stuff. He can't answer any of it. Like, nothing. And that to me was like amazing. It wasn't like I went in there with hyper-complicated questions. I'm a really well-experienced interviewer. I'm going to trip you up with my sophistry. It was like, hey, Ted, who lives in Iran? No clue. And he's calling for an overthrow. So I imagine we'd have more fun like that, and I would stop anything I was doing to have more of that, because I just loved it.
That was funny.
You have the steak. You want to cut your steak. You don't want to cut like a buffoon. You want to get these great shots. Look at that juice.
There's a book out about you called Hated by All the Right People, which is a brilliant title, something you should be very proud of. Have you read this book?
No. It's the second book about me I have not cracked. I hope by the time I die, hopefully many years from now, I will have a whole shelf of books about me I've never read or even opened. No, I haven't. But, you know, I sort of know who I am. I know my faults. I have some sense of my strengths. But most important, I've been married to the same girl for 35 years. Been with her for 42. I've got a bunch of kids. They know me well. My college roommate, freshman year college roommate, is my business partner. So, like, I'm surrounded by people I've known all my life. And I care about their opinions. I don't care so much about what some book author who I never even talked to thinks of me. I bet it's not flattering. It's my guess. Let me get some financial summary.
Well, no, actually, there were just some funny things. Well, you may not find them funny, but there were some certain things in there which my team assembled, which you're under no obligation to answer, by the way, but they're just quite entertaining.
I'm happy.
Well, it claims that you were a brilliantly gifted but wayward youth who lost his virginity at 14 in a visit to a Nevada brothel arranged by your father. Is that true?
Not true. Not true.
Not true?
Not true. I mean, not true in the I can say not true. No, my father? No, here's the part that I want to say is definitely not true.
Your father wasn't there.
Of course not. That's gross. Come on now. No, you can bring your son to a bordello? No, of course, no. My father was, I promise, my father's passed away. He's not here to hear this, but in his memory, I just want to be really, really clear. No, my father would never do that. And I would never accompany him.
But just to be clear,
To the whorehouse.
but that is a qualified denial of one aspect of the sentence.
I don't even know what he's talking about. But I will say, yeah, there were some wayward elements in my youth for sure. I was not successful in school and all that entails. But, and that's why I've never been a huge proponent of college. I certainly got very little out of it. I harmed myself a lot during it. And so I've been pretty transparent about that. I've never claimed to be impressive. I couldn't get into college and I couldn't get a job. That's why I wanted for journalism, by the way. I tried to have a real job as a teacher or operations officer at CIA. They turned me down. They actually did turn me down, by the way. It's not an op. And I was not impressive at all. And the last thing I was
that was actually my second. That's actually in the book, because apparently the agency preferred not to hire people who they viewed as gabby and insubordinate.
Oh, is that true? I didn't even, I took all these personality assessment tests. I was under family pressure to do this. So I did, and I thought it'd be interesting, by the way, to live abroad. And it was 1990 was a different world, right? And I'm not a CIA officer now, nor am I working for them in any capacity at all. In fact, they hassled me yesterday. But I did apply, and I was told I had used forbidden substances within the last year, and that's why I didn't get it. But I am gabby and insubordinate. There's no question about that. I am both gabby and insubordinate. And they gave me these personality tests, which lasted all day long. Anyone who's applied to a federal, national security type job knows what I'm talking about. And they find out who you really are. And I am totally unsuited for a job like that, like completely. But you don't know yourself when you're 20, right?
No, God, if I had a book like this, all hell would break loose. The final one I liked was that it charted your experience on Dancing with the Stars in 2006. You were voted off first, and the book quotes you as saying the experience rattled you more than Hezbollah. Is that true?
More than Hezbollah. Actually, I have spent time with Hezbollah. I know Ben Shapiro's going to want to send me a pager after I say this. I was just covering them as a journalist, but it was during the 2006 war with Israel under the Omar government. No, it didn't. I mean, I was humiliated, but, I think it's good for a man to be humiliated. It is. It is. Especially if you're on television. It's good because everyone just kisses your butt, and the makeup artists are fawning over you, and, you can convince yourself of the great lie, which is, I'm very impressive. I'm so important because I've got some dumb cable TV show. And so getting up there and being revealed as ungainly was good for me. I have to say, I have never gained weight so fast as when I did Dancing with the Stars, because all I do is eat creme brulee and chain smoke cigarettes, all day long. And by the end, I was on the verge of type 2 diabetes and emphysema. It was, everyone else got fit, and they were like, ooh, I'm getting in shape for Dancing with the Stars. I was sitting by the pool, burning candles, stress eating. It was not a high point for me, I would say.
Watch how this same thing removes all mold from my musty basement in just 40.
Well, while you were doing that, I was almost exactly at the same time competing in a show called Celebrity Apprentice, where I met the host,
I remember
Donald
that.
J. Trump, and he voted me his apprentice.
That was 20 years ago. I remember that so well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we were both in
You
Los
were
Angeles.
pirouetting, and I was in the boardroom, yeah. It's been a long journey.
Amazing what we learned up, Piers Morgan. It has been a long journey. Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
Saka, I love talking to you. I don't agree, actually, as you said, with a lot, many things you said. I was going to say, I don't think I've ever interviewed you where I've agreed with more of what you said than I have today. And so I'm grateful to you for doing another interview with me. And I just want to say, I just think I've found myself nodding along to almost everything you said. I think there's been so much crap talked about anti-Semitism,
know what this is.
weaponizing it as a way to censor people, to threaten, to bully people,
No, it's a
to
real
live by
different.
people like
Oh,
mentioned,
that's funny.
who've exposed themselves just as shameless little hypocrites and propagandists, actually, for a government which is thoroughly worthy through its actions of being scrutinized properly and criticized properly. It doesn't mean I disagree with everything the Israeli government does, I don't. But there are some things I inherently don't like about what they're doing, and I don't think they're accountable. I don't think they allow freedom of the press, and therefore it's incumbent on all of us to properly scrutinize them. And if you don't like what they're doing, you should be allowed to say so loudly and proudly in a free democratic society like America or the UK or anywhere else. Because otherwise, what's the point of democracy if you can't criticize the government? It's absurd. And the idea that you extrapolate that to mean, well, if you criticize a government, then you must hate the country and hate the people is ridiculous and actually offensive. On that, I just think the fundamental.
And you're also going to see the industry pull back some of those unused commitments, and that's going to put pressure on private equity and private credit funds, and that's going to be quite a mess. But they were also convinced that this was a superior trade and that they were going to make more money, that they ignored some of these warning signs.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of The Wrap with Chris Whalen, where we break down what's happening on Wall Street, DC, and everywhere in between, what's happening in markets and the economy. Chris, great to see you as always.
Good morning, Julia. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday and good morning to you. All right, Chris, since you have been the guy who has been on top of all things private credit, and that seems to be the topic these days. I open up X every single day, and there's just a new batch of headlines in the space, and this week we had JP Morgan actively marking down private loans and pulling back credit to private credit clients. So is this the moment then where we go from that slow unwind to an actual crisis? Is JP Morgan the canary in the coal mine?
No, but JP Morgan is the biggest secured lender in the country, so they tend to set the pace for the rest of the banking industry. When they don't like an exposure, everyone has to pay attention to that. Private credit's going to unwind very slowly because it's private. You can't see what's going on. And this is an episodic tale of greed and stupidity on the part of Wall Street that I think could be one of the biggest busts in U.S. financial history. The reason is that what happened was originally people used to invest in hedge funds. Then they kind of decided that private was better because hedge funds have to mark their assets to market every day. And they loaded into private. At first it worked. You know, the Harvards and the rest of them had it all to themselves. But the street kept putting more capacity into this trade, and they wanted more fees. Of course they wanted more fees, right? That's how bankers think. So over time, this whole thing went from just private equity to private credit, and it went from institutional investors only to qualified investors and eventually retail. So it's going to take a long time for this to unwind. The banks have a protected position in many of these transactions because they tended to take the best credit, if you will, and everybody else is subordinated to the banks. They use collateralized loan obligations to slice and dice the exposures. So the banks are sitting there saying, well, I have a AAA asset, I don't have any risk. But that's not true. They can even end up losing money, even though they have a AAA CLO sitting in their portfolio. So this is going to take time to unwind. It's not this month's crisis, definitely not. But I am going to do a piece next week for the blog that talks about some of these details because it's really, too much to try to go through it on the broadcast.
Mm-hmm. You did have another piece that came out in the Daily Reckoning that was syndicated in Zero Hedge, that the banks have $1.4 trillion in outstanding loans to non-depository financial institutions, which I know they're a player in the space, but then they have another $2.8 trillion in undrawn commitments sitting on top of that. So the potential exposure is $4.2 trillion. So for every dollar lent, $2 more are waiting to be drawn. So that's really interesting. Do you think I take it the average investor does not understand this?
No, they don't. And what's going to happen is banks will take losses on this stuff. They will do so grudgingly over time.
And you're also going to see the industry pull back some of those unused commitments, and that's going to put pressure on private equity and private credit funds. They're going to really, I think, eventually just going to have to try and sell stuff that they cannot sell, and that's going to be quite a mess. So, see, what's interesting is that the whole notion of private it should raise big red flags for most investors, but they were also convinced that this was a superior trade and that they were going to make more money, that they ignored some of these warning signs. They ignored the fact that you were contractually unable to sue the sponsor. They ignored the non-disclosure agreements. So many investors are sitting here today and they have no rights. They're subordinated to the banks that lend money to these things, and they literally have no legal rights, Julia, which I think is very unfortunate.
How do you think that ultimately plays out? Are we going to see a lot of litigation?
Well, the politics of this are going to be interesting. There's a fascinating litigation going on between Jefferies, which was a big lender to First Brands, the auto parts maker that had a lot of fraud involved with collapse and the bankruptcy. And Western Alliance was one of the lender banks. So Jefferies put the collateral on one of these loans into a special purpose entity, and now they're saying, well, it's not ours. You've got to go sue the SPE to get your money back. And Western Alliance is saying, no. You may recall in 2008, a bank called Citicorp, or Citigroup, had the same situation. The bondholders showed up and said, give us our money back. So I think these off-balance sheet entities, once again, are really at the center of this mess. And you're going to see litigation, you're going to see losses, and it's going to take years to unwind this.
You know, as someone who follows the banking sector closely, I believe like last time you said you really don't have the long exposure to financials. Is that correct?
No, not right now. The only common I own is Flagstar, because I bought it very, very deep discount. They're slowly clawing their way out of New York multifamily real estate. I know the team. I know the CFO very well, Lee Smith, and I think he's going to turn the bank around. But it's a risky position, I admit. I got out of all of the rest of my common back in the fall after we ran all summer, remember? We had Independence Day, the financials sold off, and then I told everybody who reads the blog, I said, guys, load up. So I bought some Schwab, I bought some American Express, rode those up for a nice 30+% gain, and then got out. Because they were expensive.
I believe you don't think this is going to be systemic, the private credit issue?
No, I think it's just going to be painful for a lot of investors, large and small. Banks will take losses, but we know about it. Systemic events occur when people are surprised. That was Jerry Corrigan's take on it years ago. And I think that's still right. When people are surprised by something, that causes markets to move. Independence Day, the whole tariff thing got people sideways, and the market sold off dramatically. That was an opportunity, and I think we'll see more of that this year. This year is going to be very interesting.
Is there any language that you've been looking for? It seems like every week someone kind of comes out and says, oh, the risk is contained, that sort of thing. Does that...
Risk is never contained.
Right, or does that kind of make the alarm bells go off when you hear that?
Look, humans are greedy by nature. It's part of our need to eat. We always chase the shiny object. And in this case, you had a lot of bankers who decided that they were entitled to make that 20% fee every year. And so they loaded a lot of investors into these things that were really not suitable, to use the term from the securities industry. Suitability is a very important thing because it makes you look at time horizons, risk, other criteria that lets you know whether a certain investment is good or bad for an investor. And that didn't happen here. Why? Because it's private. By having these vehicles be in the private market instead of a public market, the sponsors were able to commit bad acts, and I hope they do get punished for it. Largely the punishment will come via lawyers, death by lawyer. So I think litigation and reputational damage is going to be the primary way that these people get punished.
This episode is brought to you by Gold Capital. The funny of us, we've talked about a bunch of these banks have quietly loaded up on private credit risk. in a way that investors still don't understand. So is there a number that would shock people?
No, but here's what they've done. They've taken a senior position in many of these credits, and they sold the subordinated tranches to other investors, credit shops, etc. So the bankers think they're safe, but the joke, of course, is that when the other tranches in the CLO get wiped out, the banks will take losses too. You also see this with business development companies, Julia. There's a lot of BDCs, both public and private, that have been playing fast and loose with the rules about leverage, and they'll load up on leverage during the quarter, and when they get to the end of the quarter, they push the leverage off using a derivative, and this is fraud. I mean, they're actually committing open fraud, but nobody at the SEC is paying attention because, Chairman Paul Atkins, who's a friend, is spending all of this time on stable coins and crypto. There's a lot of stuff going on in the markets that the SEC and the other regulators ought to be paying attention to.
Do you think that fraud is systemic then?
I think the accounting fraud is systemic. When I'm a BDC and I'm limited to 2 times leverage, and in fact I have 5 or 6, but then I window dress my financials at the end of the quarter so that my investors don't see it, that's fraud. Very definitely.
All right, well, that is so space
Systemic then.
There's a lot of stuff going on in the markets that the SEC and the other regulators ought to be paying attention to.
Do you think that fraud is systemic then?
I think the accounting fraud is systemic. When I'm a BDC and I'm limited to 2 times leverage, and in fact I have 5 or 6, but then I window dress my financials at the end of the quarter so that my investors don't see it, that's fraud. Very definitely.
All right, well, that is a space we'll definitely continue to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Toward the end of last week's episode of The Wrap, you said something that kind of became the buzzy headline of the episode, that you thought the Trump administration would end any financial crisis. Can you elaborate on that a bit more, and are we already seeing like early warning signs?
Yeah, I think the accumulation of things like what we've been talking about in private credit, real estate, which is still very interesting on the commercial side, and residential housing. When the Trump administration rolled back all of the COVID era progressive rules for foreclosure and delinquency, they caused an enormous increase in the visible amount of delinquency in residential mortgages, especially in the FHA and VA. So I think you're going to be reading about that this year in a big way. It's a cost for lenders because they have to buy those loans back at par. And this goes both for agency loans and also private loans. So when that loan goes sideways and the customer can't pay, the issuer has to buy it back. This is, every few years we have to kind of reckon all of the fun and games that have been going on for the past decade, and that's kind of where we are. We're at this point where there's so many things that need to be squared in terms of bringing people back down to reality, that even if the Fed were to start cutting interest rates very aggressively, next week, I still don't think it would help cushion the blow that we are going to feel in a lot of different areas of credit. So that's why I said that it's very likely that when the Trump administration ends, we're going to be in the middle of a housing price correction, even though obviously it's really hard to find homes right now. But I do think we are going to see a pretty significant correction by 2028.
And that would be the misery on the 8th that he's been talking about.
Misery on the 8th, that's right.
2028.
We are going to see a administration ends. We feel in a lot of different areas of credit. So that's why I said that it's very likely that when the Trump administration ends, we're going to be in the middle of a housing price correction, even though obviously it's really hard to find homes right now. But I do think we are going to see a pretty significant correction by 2028.
And that would be the misery on the 8th that he's been talking about.
Misery on the 8th, that's right.
2028, because that will be the last year of the presidency for Trump. Okay. Okay, question then. You mentioned like rate cuts. We talked about rate cuts. I think even last time we might see one this month, but do you think so? Especially with what we've seen with the oil prices.
A lot of economists are saying that the central banks around the world are going to have to wait because of oil price hikes. My sense is, oil prices as a result of war, it's not a monetary event. It's more a case where, you have to deal with this externality until it goes away. On the other hand, the economy is clearly slowing. If you look at the jobs numbers, Julia, they got revised downward. And I think that the Fed is going to be under a lot of pressure to cut. When Kevin Warsh gets confirmed as chair, you're going to see him very definitely pushing for cuts. Because if you look at the charts, where we are today in terms of interest rates, it's still quite elevated compared to where we were for the past 12 years. And I think on that basis alone, with the slowing jobs market, you're probably going to see at least one, if not two, cuts by the Fed this year in short-term rates.
Because like a hike would probably be a mistake, because if I recall, like before the financial crisis, there was an oil price shock then. Maybe I think the prices were higher than today, and some central banks raised rates. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. Some feel that is an appropriate policy response, but there's nothing a central bank can do about a war in the Middle East. The two are totally disconnected. So I think the central bankers should stick to their models, look at what's happening in the jobs market and the economy overall. And clearly, we're going to have an inflationary bump because gasoline prices, other prices for energy are going to move higher. There's no question about it. So the question to my mind is, how long does this go on? How long is the Strait of Hormuz closed? How long is that flow of not just oil, but chemicals and other products going to be constrained coming out of the Middle East? And I'm not sure there's anything the central bank can do about that, Julia.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a good point, Chris. Okay, so base case still 1 to 2 cuts.
Yeah, I think so. And higher oil prices. We could see oil at $100 a barrel for most of this year, if not the whole year.
Any concerns around oil being at that level?
No, I thought it was too low, to be honest with you. But that's just a function of the fact that consumption is changing. In the United States, new vehicles, new methodologies for technology are causing consumption of energy to fall. And that's a good thing. You're seeing this all over the world, the adoption of different types of technology in vehicles, for example, is slowing the rate of increase in energy consumption. So, if we solve the problem tomorrow between Iran and the United States, I think oil prices would fall back down to lower than they were before the war started.
Interesting. And you like energy stocks, if I recall.
I have. One of my best trades was Chevron.
Chevron, yeah.
Although, I just took some profits there. I had also done very well with Williams, the pipeline company. So, people need energy. We're not going to stop that tomorrow. But I do think that technology is a very important component in the analysis. You've got to be aware of how different types of efficiency are being introduced into the system that makes it possible to consume less energy.
Okay, so I want to go back to housing for a second, because you also wrote that the Senate passed a housing bill that reads like an Elizabeth Warren agenda. I like that. And you also pointed out that Trump's not really paying attention to housing because of the focus on foreign policy, what's happening in Iran. So do you think housing's just off the radar then for DC?
I think that the Senate certainly wanted to move that legislation. There's a lot of things in it, some good, some bad. I'm not sure the House is going to focus on it, and unless President Trump is pushing for the House to move on the legislation, it may end up dying in the House. It's interesting. There are parts of it that the Republicans really like. There are parts of it that the Democrats really like. But unless you have an engaged White House that wants to really focus on this, I just don't know how you get it through and get it signed into law. The Trump administration has shown an indifference to housing. They kind of sort of paid attention to it because affordability is such a big issue with voters now. But other than that, a couple press releases here and there, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac buying back their own debt in the mortgage securities market, there hasn't been a lot of substance. coming from the White House in terms of housing.
Well, you just mentioned like the buzzword of the year, and that has been affordability.
Yes.
Where do you think President Trump's going to just put his attention on that? We're in a midterm year. Like, midterms are coming up. So, is he cooked at this point?
Well, given where gasoline prices are headed as we go into the summer, I think that's going to be a big negative for the Republicans. I don't know what got him to suddenly jump into bed with Bibi Netanyahu and go to war with Iran at this point, but it certainly has changed the calculus regarding the midterm elections rather dramatically. There are a lot of Republicans in Washington who are very unhappy about the war. So I just don't know how they're going to be able to address things like affordability in a real way between now and November.
Yeah, that will be an interesting one to watch, Chris. Okay, so base case, you think,
Well, we still have $100 a barrel of oil by election day. How about that?
There you go. Then, yeah. That would open up a whole other can of worms, too, I imagine, too, if the midterms don't go his way. Okay, so let's stay on DC for a sec. No one's even talking about the budget deficit, it seems like.
Nope.
No one's really talking about the dollar either. So, what do you think is like Trump's economic end game here? Do you think it's just Iran? Tariffs? Like, what do you think?
Well, you're assuming he has one. Different agencies in Washington are doing their own thing. The Fed is pursuing some changes for the banks, and the SEC is pursuing their pro-crypto policies, of course. But I don't see a cohesive economic agenda coming out of this White House. Trump tends to get focused on one thing at a time, and right now it's foreign policy. He kind of likes that because it's relatively easy. The conversation with domestic policy issues is more difficult. And like I say, I don't see a cohesive economic program coming from the Trump White House right now. They certainly haven't been able to articulate it, if there is one.
Has anything changed for you lately from the investor perspective with more of the focus being on foreign policy right now? Has that changed anything for you in the last couple of weeks?
No, the markets have largely ignored what's going on in the Middle East. We had to sell off in AI-related and software-related stocks. Obviously, you have the issues with credit and private equity. But the rest of the broad market has been largely unaffected. It's a confused time. I don't see any clear trend one way or another. Some people are betting on lower interest rates. Some people are betting on not. So I think there's a lack of a really clear narrative for the markets to follow right now. And, basically we're going sideways. Look at gold and silver. They've been basically trending sideways this whole time. And, that doesn't surprise me because that was really a trade last year where it was short dollar, long gold and silver. Everybody was kind of buying that one. So today, I think Wall Street is desperately looking for a new narrative, and they haven't found one yet.
So, okay, gold and silver, though, do you see an opportunity for a breakout, or was that just more last year?
Well, I think last year, as we talked about, was rather extraordinary in many ways. So my guess is they're going to kind of go sideways and then slowly back up, especially gold. Silver has had a tremendous run. Wouldn't surprise me if it corrects a bit now.
Yeah, I think you pointed out like one of the silver ETFs was up huge in January.
I know.
Yeah.
Every month we price that group of stocks that we've been assembling for our readers, and it's striking how silver caught up with gold and then passed it. It almost did 2x gold.
Well, I wonder if it's like having its, more of its mainstream moment then for investors.
Yes and no. I still think the commercial demand factor and the lack of deliverable supply are the big things driving silver. If you look at the action in Asia and some of the commentaries that have been coming out of India also, it's pretty clear that the Asian markets are now the price setters for silver. There's no question.
Okay, for the broader markets, you pointed out that Ed Yardeni, he raised His meltdown probability is 35%. But when I'm listening to you, you seem less alarmed. So where do you disagree with him?
This market wants to stay invested. I don't see people in this market running for the doors, going to cash, putting physical currency under their mattresses. That's just not the way this is playing out. And, I think sometimes analysts are looking for old-fashioned sell-offs, old-fashioned crises. When the reality is that this is an inflated market, and the managers have no incentive or desire to
It's just a buyout offer.
So that, to me, is what's holding this up. The ETFs, the passive.
That's crazy. It had to.
And most managers in the large and mid-cap stocks, are they looking to sell and get out? No. Even the financials, surprisingly, commentary you and I have been making and others have been making about asset quality, banks haven't come down that much. JP is still trading over 2 times book. So when I look at that, what it tells me is that, yeah, people are concerned, but they're not concerned enough to go to cash and really pull this market down. At least not yet.
That's crazy.
Passive bid as well. Come up on the show. Quite a bit.
Market.
Yeah, folks like Mike Green have talked about that. The passive bid. It's been so critical and yeah.
Now, when you have selling, those ETFs will pull you down faster.
Yeah,
that's the dynamic.
That's really annoying, actually.
Okay, on the financials, because I know you also have the list that you publish. Goldman's now the number one in your Q1 2026 top 50 for the banks, and JP Morgan's fallen to 41. What does that tell us?
Goldman has since given ground. We did that list in the kind of third week of January, and since then all of the large caps have basically fallen back to the middle or the bottom of the group. Now, that doesn't mean they've sold off a lot, but it means that other smaller stocks have performed better. Merchants Bank of Indiana was the top last time I looked at our group. And that's a small regional bank, specialized wholesale bank. But, for its own peculiar reasons, it's performed better than the large caps. Citi, which was one of the best performers in the group last year, fell back dramatically. And of course, SoFi, which was the best performing U.S. bank in most of 2025, is down at the bottom of the group. So what that tells you is that, last year was an extraordinary year. You've had a lot of narratives that were pushing certain stocks, and those narratives have run out of gas. And people have taken profits. And it's striking to me, you see all of these small and mid-cap names in our bank group in the top 25.
Yeah.
Normally you see at least a couple of the large caps. Goldman has been a great performer, but again, they have given ground.
What's your highest conviction idea right now?
My highest conviction idea?
Yeah.
I think preserving capital is really where I'm focused. I don't have any really great ideas, unlike last year when we were able to make some real good money. First with the banks, and then July, August, we did a trade with Fannie and Freddie that was very good, almost 40%. So I don't see clear indicators like that right now, Julia.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you can, take a quick mail every single We are trying to hit our next goal of 100,000 subscribers. Really appreciate you, and back to the video. All right, Chris, the viewer mail.
Viewer mail, I know.
You want me to go through it, or do you want to go through it?
No, you go ahead. I'll answer. You read them.
All right, here we go. And we appreciate your questions, y'all, every single week. All right, this comes from The Grateful Guy. I would love to hear Chris explain how he reconciles his currency debasement thesis, long PM, with his long analytic position. From my understanding, NLY is a highly leveraged paper company, meaning they borrow short to lend long. What if there is a bear steepener? Can you please ask him to expand on this portion of the thesis?
No, it was a very good question. First off, realize that REITs are different. Annaly buys mortgage-backed securities. They also buy mortgage servicing rights. They fund themselves primarily short-term, not long-term. So they are using the repo markets to fund their securities. Then they have equity, and both common and preferred equity, and they have to pay a dividend. Right now, Annaly's dividend's almost 13% on the common. The reason Bear Steepener doesn't worry me with an agency read like Annaly is that Steep is good. They like Steep. It has more spread between short-term
yeah, I
and
thought this
long-term.
was around like 80.
Now, if I'm
really
a
dropped.
REIT and I own buildings,
Holy
I
shit.
have to issue debt, long-term debt.
It's probably a good buy point.
So a Bear Steepener is bad if I'm running a REIT that owns office buildings. With a agency REIT, these guys hedge very aggressively. So the whole idea of having a lot more difference between long and short-term rates actually helps them. Now, to the point about allocation, I'm all in for, the whole precious metals trade, as you guys know. But we do have to function in the fiat world. So when it comes to fiat currency, you want to maximize your income. It's very simple. That's why I like stocks like Annaly. They pay me good income. So you have to have both. It's a barbell strategy. On the one hand, I like precious metals because as a long term, they're very good for the portfolio. And at the same time, I want income in my portfolio. And you have to have your T-bills. The next step is something like Annaly because it has high quality assets and they're also very good at managing those assets. There are a lot of other REITs, by the way. We have another question.
I said the whole real estate sector is just dropped.
And,
I
I
think
think
it's
it's
time
going
to
to
start buying
start
some of these.
for something like T-bills because they pay me 3 times a yield, 4 times a yield for that.
Well, speaking of that other viewer question, this comes from Hokkaido. I think I'm saying your stream name correctly. I don't know. These are YouTube comment questions. All right. One question though about Annaly that you keep on mentioning as a good yielding investment: low beta. Yahoo lists Annaly with a beta of 1.3. So does IBKR, which is not low at all. 0.5 would be low, right? So did I miss something or what?
No, you don't miss something, but think about it. A stock with a beta of 0.5 is going to be something that doesn't react to the market, and it's also going to be something that's not going to pay you very much. The whole point of Annaly is that they're paying you a levered return. That's how they get that dividend. They have to lever up their assets, and that's why they use repo funding for it. And that's how they're able to deliver that. Now, what's a high beta stock? High beta stock is something like United Wholesale Mortgage, or Robinhood, or any of these others, Tesla. Those are around 2 or higher. And there are some stocks that are even much higher than 2. NVIDIA was another one at one point. It had a beta of almost 3. So when I say it's low beta, to me, it's a relative thing. Now, why has something like Annaly appreciated this way? Because remember, this is a REIT. We buy REITs for income. We don't buy REITs for capital appreciation. But the reality is there are a lot of people who will buy an Annaly, looking for stock appreciation. And I think they're missing the point. The whole point of a REIT is that they have to pay out 90% of their income in order to continue to have that special status with the IRS because they don't pay taxes. It's what we call a pass-through. So what I would say to you is that in relative terms, it's a low beta stock. It's not below 1 where my basis in Annaly is 0.8. That's where I started accumulating it. So that's why I'm kind of indifferent to the price. But yeah, it's okay. It's certainly higher than 1, but is it a high beta stock? No. I think you have to differentiate between the two. You also have to realize Annaly is very popular. It's got a good management team. People like the yield. And remember, these guys don't issue long-term debt like a property REIT does. They fund themselves off of common equity, and then they use the repo market for their leverage. So that's how I think about Annaly.
All right, on to your question, they would like for you to comment on whether the seemingly rock-solid employment picture in healthcare and to a lesser degree the growth in high-salary tech jobs, minus whatever minor AI-ish layoffs are happening.
Need to listen to this. Honestly, I'd probably go
call is being recorded and simultaneously webcast. An archived version of the webcast will be available on the Investor Relations section of the company's website, located at investors.element.com, for 1 year. I would like to turn the conference over to Douglas Elliman's Vice President of Finance, Heather Capriola.
Thank you, and good morning. On the call with me today is Michael Leibowitz, President and CEO of Douglas Elliman, Inc., and Brian Kirkland, CFO of Douglas Elliman, Inc. During this call, the terms adjusted EBITDA and adjusted net loss or income will be used. These terms are non-GAAP financial measures and should be considered in addition to, but not as a substitute for, other measures of financial performance prepared in accordance with GAAP. Reconciliations to adjusted EBITDA and adjusted net income or loss are contained in the company's earnings release, which has been posted to the Investor Relations section of the company's website. Before the call begins, I would like to read a safe harbor statement. The statements made during this conference call that are not historical facts are forward-looking statements that are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from those set forth in or implied by forward-looking statements. These risks are described in more detail in the company's Securities and Exchange Commission filings. Any forward-looking statements made during this call are made as of today, and the company undertakes no duty to update or revise any such statements, whether as a result of new information, future events, or otherwise, except as required by law. Now, I would like to turn the call over to the Chief Executive Officer of Douglas Elliman, Michael S. Leibowitz.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Douglas Elliman continues to build on the strong momentum established by the decisive steps we took in 2025, including strategic alignment and disciplined financial management, underpinned by our unwavering commitment to luxury service. The fourth quarter was a period of bold execution and meaningful progress on our long-term vision to be the leading independent luxury real estate brokerage driven by innovation, talent, and a relentless focus on our clients and agents. This progress positions Douglas Elliman well for long-term success and value creation for our stakeholders. On today's call, we will discuss the current operating environment and Douglas Elliman's financial results for the 3 months and year ended December 31st, 2025. All numbers presented this morning will be as of December 31st, 2025, unless otherwise stated. Before we turn to our results, I want to highlight several key developments from the past quarter that underscore our differentiated strategy and the unique strengths that set Douglas Elliman apart. First, we continue to actively pursue opportunities to deepen our footprint in existing markets while strategically entering new, high-potential regions. We continued expanding our brand internationally with our recent entry into the French Alps, building on our successful launches in Bordeaux, the French Riviera, and Monaco. Under the leadership of Rich Green, our brand's presence in these globally recognized luxury destinations is already generating significant interest from high-net-worth clients seeking exclusive cross-border expertise. By partnering with seasoned industry leaders and local specialists, we believe we have further enhanced our ability to deliver best-in-class service and bespoke solutions in the world's most coveted markets. We currently operate in 9 markets in the United States and believe there is a significant opportunity to further expand our presence as well as the Douglas Elliman brand in our existing and new markets. To support this strategy, Douglas Elliman recently launched 2 growth teams. The Market Growth Team, focused on expanding our footprint within current markets, and the New Markets Team, responsible for driving our expansion into new domestic and international markets. These teams will strategically recruit agents by highlighting our competitive advantage in serving the luxury real estate sector. Second, we have continued to expand our core service offerings. The successful launch of Elliman Kaplan New York, following its debut in Florida, marks a significant step forward in our mission to deliver a seamless, integrated real estate and financing experience for our clients. By leveraging our strategic alliance with Associated Mortgage Bankers, Element Capital provides agents and clients with a comprehensive suite of lending solutions, competitive rates, and the streamlined support that only an in-house platform can offer. This initiative strengthens our value proposition in our flagship markets and positions us to capture new opportunities among traditional and non-traditional borrowers alike. Third, we have reinforced our leadership team with appointments that signal our commitment to growth and innovation, operational excellence, and agent empowerment. Our brokerage subsidiary has appointed Wendy Purvey as Chief Strategy Officer, and her appointment further strengthens our capacity to drive growth through agent acquisitions, international partnerships, and new service lines. Our brokerage subsidiary has also welcomed the return of Natalie Passerini as Chief Marketing Officer and the addition of Chris Reyes as Chief Technology Officer. Natalie and Chris bring deep expertise and fresh vision to our brand evolution, digital strategy, and agent support platforms. We are excited to welcome these accomplished leaders to the Douglas Elliman team and look forward to the energy, insight, and collaboration they will bring as we continue to elevate our company and support our agents. Finally, we have also made significant investments in market intelligence, technology, and agent resources. We recently launched a new market data report program, which will provide agents and clients with timely, transparent insights tailored to our markets. Our ongoing rollout of agent-centric technology, including LEAI, Element Private Listings, and enhanced marketing tools, ensures our professionals remain at the forefront of the industry, equipped to deliver exceptional value and results. Now turning to our 2025 results, was a pivotal year in which we advanced our strategic transformation and strengthened our financial position. Our revenues for 2025 increased by 3.8% year over year to $1.033 billion. We made considerable progress toward restoring profitability, reporting operating income of $45.5 million, a significant improvement from our operating loss of $68.8 million in 2024. This year's operating income was positively impacted by an $81.7 million gain from the sale of our property management division in October. After adjusting for this gain and other items, our adjusted EBITDA for 2025 improved to a loss of $14 million compared to a loss of $24.1 in 2024. With cash and cash equivalents of approximately $115.5 million at December 31, 2025, and no long-term debt following the redemption of our convertible notes, we are strategically positioned to capitalize on market opportunities in our evolving industry. We believe 2026 will mark the beginning of a new growth phase, as the investments and strategic moves we made in 25 begin to yield results. Our strengthened balance sheet and enhanced operational capabilities give us flexibility to enter new markets, scale our innovative offerings, and attract top talent. This foundation enables us to respond proactively to emerging opportunities and evolving client needs, helping us in our quest to drive long-term growth and deliver sustainable value for our clients, agents, and stockholders. With that, I will turn it over to Brian, who will provide more details on our financial performance and the trends shaping the residential real estate market.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning. We are confident that our positive momentum is continuing and has positioned Douglas Elliman for long-term success. As Michael discussed, we believe our strong balance sheet provides Douglas Elliman with a competitive advantage as we implement our plans to grow in our existing markets, expand in the new markets where appropriate, and strengthen our services platform as opportunities arise in our ever-changing industry. And the results from the year ended December 31st, 2025 indicate that our core operations are starting to reflect the impact of strategic actions we have taken over the past 2 years. In particular, results from operations for the year ended December 31st, 2025 benefited from a favorable sales mix, highlighted by strong contributions from development marketing in the Northeast region. Specifically, Revenues from our development marketing division increased by $12.6 million from the prior year as we began to see the benefits of the investments we have made in this division in recent years. As a reminder, we recognize commission income from development marketing contracts when the underlying units close. I would now like to discuss a few key trends. First, Douglas Elliman continues to set the standard in the luxury market with luxury home pricing remaining strong. Our average price per transaction in 2025 increased to $1.86 million per home sold, compared to $1.67 million per home sold in 2024. In the fourth quarter of 2025, our agents sold 282 homes priced at more than $5 million, representing 5.4% of total transactions, and 1,282 such homes during the year ended December 31st, 2025. That's a 25% increase compared to the year ended December 31st, 2024. We also sold 102 homes for more than $10 million in the fourth quarter and 392 in 2025. Those are increases of 31% and 28% respectively from last year. These results clearly demonstrate Douglas Elliman remains the definitive name in luxury real estate. Next, our development market with an active project pipeline totaling $25.3 billion in gross transaction value. That includes $17.5 billion in gross transaction value in Florida alone. In addition to this pipeline, $7.5 billion of gross transaction value is expected to come to market through December 2026. We believe this strong foundation positions us well for the future as we will recognize commission income from these projects upon closing, which is generally between 2026 and 2031. Development marketing revenue increased to $80.4 million in the year ended December 31st, 2025, up from $67.8 million in 2024. I'm also pleased to report each of our geographic markets increased revenues from existing home sales in 2025. Consistent with the third quarter, leading the way was the Northeast market, which increased by $17.5 million or 9.2% from 2024. Importantly, we achieved these results amid ongoing economic pressures, including geopolitical uncertainty and the continuation of elevated mortgage rates. Although not included in our fourth quarter results, cash receipts from existing home sales in January and February 2026 were 11% lower than January and February 2025, and total brokerage cash receipts, which include existing home sales and receipts from our development marketing division, were 12.4% lower than January and February 2025. As a reminder, the first quarter of 2025 is a difficult comparable because it had the highest revenues in a quarter since 2022. Highest revenues in a first quarter since 2022. Let us move to updates on our expense structure and our continued focus on operational efficiency. We continue to manage investments across our markets with a strict focus on return on investment metrics. For the 3 months and year ended December 31st, 2025, we continue to target expenses with office leases, professional services, and technology. Nonetheless, our expense structure was negatively impacted by inflationary trends and increased personnel expenses. The increase in personnel expenses was primarily attributable to our ongoing investment in the development of marketing business, as well as increased bonus accruals associated with increased revenues from business performance in 2025. Next, the strength of Douglas Elliman's balance sheet continues to provide a competitive advantage as we focus on executing our growth strategy. In October 2025, in connection with and upon consummation of the sale of our property management business, the company agreed to repay and redeem all of our convertible notes for an aggregate payment of $95 million, which included accrued interest. As Michael noted, this strengthened our financial position, and the company had $115.5 million of cash and cash equivalents and no long-term debt at December 31st, 2025. We believe our strong balance sheet gives Douglas Elliman a competitive advantage by providing optionality to expand into new markets where appropriate and strengthen our services platform as opportunities arise in our ever-changing industry. Now, moving to the operating performance of the business in the fourth quarter. Douglas Elliman reported $245.4 million in revenues compared to $243.3 million in the 2024 period. Excluding revenues from our recently disposed property management business in both periods, revenues increased by 3.8% from the fourth quarter of 2024 to $243.3 million from $234.2 million. Net income was $68.6 million or 68 cents per diluted share compared to net loss of $6 million or 7 cents per diluted share in the 2024 period. Net income in the 2025 period included a gain of $81.7 million from the disposal of our property management business and a non-cash benefit of $4.7 million associated with the decline in fair value of derivatives embedded within our convertible debt. Net loss in the 2024 period included a non-cash benefit of $5.2 million associated with the decline in fair value of derivatives embedded within our convertible debt. Adjusted EBITDA, which excludes the operations of our property management business in all periods, for the quarter was a loss of $10.6 million compared to a loss of $6.6 million in the 2024 period. Adjusted net loss in the fourth quarter was $14.2 million or 17 cents per share compared to adjusted net income of $1.3 million or 1 cent per share in the 2024 period. Now, turning to the operating performance of the business for the year ended December 31st, 2025, which will be compared to the year ended December 31st, 2024. Douglas Elliman reported $1,033 million in revenues, up from $995.6 million in revenues in 2024. Excluding revenues from our recently disposed property management business in both periods, revenues for the year increased by 4.4% from 2024 to $1 billion from $958.8 million. Net income for 2025 was $15.2 million or 17 cents per diluted share compared to net loss of $76.3 million or 91 cents per diluted share. Net income in the 2025 period included a gain from the disposal of our property management business of $81.7 million, which was offset by a non-cash charge of $28.5 million associated with the increase in fair value of derivatives embedded within our convertible debt. Net loss in the 2024 period included a $17.75 million litigation settlement charge and a non-cash charge of $15 million associated with the increase in fair value of the derivatives embedded within our convertible debt. Adjusted EBITDA for 2025 was a loss of $14 million compared to a loss of $24.1 million in the 2024 period, and both of these amounts exclude operations of our recently disposed property management business. Adjusted net loss for 2025 was $27.1 million or 32 cents per share compared to $29.6 million or 35 cents per share in the 2024 period. As noted earlier, Douglas Elliman has maintained ample liquidity with cash and cash equivalents at December 31st, 2025 of approximately $115.5 million. Thank you for your attention, and now back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Bryant. We have implemented strategic initiatives to advance our market leadership, elevate our service offerings, and expand our reach, both domestically and internationally. Our 2025 results demonstrate that our recent investments are already delivering tangible benefits, and we expect these positive impacts to continue into 2026 and beyond. Thank you for your continued trust in Douglas Elliman. With that, we will turn the call over to the operator. Operator?
Thank you for joining us on Douglas Elliman's quarterly earnings conference call. We hope you have a good day, and this will conclude our call.
Which is still high as shit, but it's probably not there for what it actually is. And it's 33. It's like out of your mind. It's definitely not worth that, so. $5 million, you have to put in a new carpet. citizens, yeah. To be honest, I'd be pissed if you bought this and then had to pay property tax. Ding ding ding, like, that's what these things are worth. Trying to get 15 for it, you would take 15 for it. Honestly, you'd probably take 11. It's a big ass crib. Lots of blue. Oh, I don't put shoes in these bitches, right? You're spending $40 million and then you still gotta go to a gym. Look at this one. This is 10,000 square feet. It's not worth $44 million. But it's only worth 36. Yeah, let this person order for 5. These people are fucking crazy, dude. They launder money. I would have sold it to him as well if you bought it for 5 and turned around and sold it for 36. Take this bullshit ass house. It's not like it changed that much. Would they knock it down then? That's confusing. for 6. There for 5.5. Sold it for 30. It's not worth it. Especially when it gets flooded out. People are gonna get fucking wrecked, bro. Nobody's we just look at this. They would take 40. Easily. This was cool. I was checking out for a while. They got such a good deal because that's what it's worth. Can't get people just got ripped off. They would have taken 12. Why did you offer 12? I'm just not seeing if it stand out of the they bag. That's a good buy. What was all your big now? this shit went for like 7. Maybe 7.5. It's not like the house changed that much. That was in 2012. Looks like a 2012 house, huh? Yeah, I gotta read more. I wanna read more. I don't really care about this. I like looking at them, but 43 million, 43 homes. I'm saying, right? These people just buy whatever. Like, you could buy something for 6 and turn around and flip it for 43. Dude, whoever bought this got their eyes ripped out. There's no way. And they bought it for what it traded at in 08. They got a deal. They knew they got a deal. There's that why, because they told that I've had some stuff already. Dude, they're buying the land for 6. They're maybe they're building this house for 7. I don't even think it's costing them $7 million to build this house. They're ripping these people off, bro. That's all I could say. How did they list it for land? Yeah, this one's kind of confusing. Maybe they bought it, knocked it down, and then re-built. Technical. Yes. We'd have holy shit. How the fire really so it's used 30. What the fuck are you? Purchase errors. Yeah, perfect. 67 now. Probably like buttons. There's another one. Culture to the door. Just fucking stand there. That's terrible, dude. It's funny as shit though. Just stand there. 'Cause it's the building. It has to be in the building. Can I see the place? What's the place look like? Is this the place you just did all this for? There's a primary, because there's 6 bedrooms. What fucking... They want 85 millions. That's the place. Say they're just still going to pay an HOA. You pay $5 million and then still have to pay an HOA. It's crazy. They're out of their minds. I can't imagine. I can imagine the house. I can't imagine paying $85 million and then still being told I have to pay an HOA. It's like with my balls. That's why these places are so stupid. Paying $60 million to not have any space. Oh great, they got a golf simulator. Give a shit. It's just the same, it's the same tower. So they just sell a bunch of shit in this tower. Everything's for sale in the tower. Contract signed. It's a crazy bookcase. Miami. After you've been looking at $10 million. Yeah, dude, so you're paying $600K though for a fucking 1-bedroom box. It's absolutely insane. This might be 2 beds. Where'd that thing go? It's like there's no way it's worth that. The kitchen's in the fucking living room. There's shit ass tile. Yeah, gym. Living nature right here. I don't trust none of this. So at 49 million get you to Miami. It's Miami Beach. Let's pattern here. I don't know if there's necessarily a pattern here. Nice to stay fed. This is in the house. This is a constant. Right there, here we go. Frederick. Nice, dude. this is like where the I feel like I looked at these before. Maybe not the stuff not worth $58 million. Alright, at least it's that's what I'm saying. By the time you get over there, it's like more than like I really feel like I might have done this place before. That's cool. It's like an old oil. Yeah, great. 50 million right in the middle. It's, if it sells for that, everyone's gonna be happy and above. I'm gonna keep reducing the price because none of this shit's worth any of that. So I'm trying to decide for sale. Yeah, 2 bed, 3 bath. You still gotta pay an HOA. It's like, you need to be out of there. It's not even worth 3. Let's see what some of these sold for before. Alright,